Stream. So just
All
before
right.
we get going here, just give us a couple minutes and I'll let you know when we're back live.
Okay, that was my practice run. I was moving along pretty quick there. That's good. Okay, I'll just mute and you just tell me when you're ready there. Okay, take two. Welcome everybody. This is your city council meeting, your special city council meeting for January 24th, 2022. It's just after 6 o'clock now, and I'm calling the meeting to order officially. And thank you so much for everyone joining. Right off the top, we're just going to have the clerk bring up our country's flag, and we'll just take a moment to focus on that. Great, thanks. And a moment of silent reflection. Great, thank you. And our territorial acknowledgement. As we're gathered tonight, we're reminded that Guelph is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. As a city, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we both live and work. Today, we acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe peoples, on whose traditional territory we're meeting tonight. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or any general nature thereof of the item that's in front of us tonight? I don't hear or see any. And just in case it wasn't captured again, Councillor Gibson has officially given regrets. So with that, we're here for the Moving Guelph Forward, the 2022 Transportation Master Plan. Lots of engagement and time has gone into this to kind of bring it to fruition for the final presentation and recommendations for us today. So thank you for everyone involved to this moment. Looking forward to hearing the presentations, delegations, and from my colleagues about the recommendations and where we go from here. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Deputy CAO, Jane Holmes, who's going to kick us off on the presentation. So settle in, everyone, and let's have a good night.
Thank you. So good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. We are happy to be here today to present the culmination of 3 years of work on updating our long-range transportation plan. We launched this plan in June of 2019 with a vision to create a future-ready transportation plan, and I'm confident that this is what we are delivering to you today. I'd like to introduce the team behind the scenes before we begin. Mr. Sean Doyle has been our project lead from Dillon Consulting. Sean has brought his many years of experience in transportation planning nationally and internationally to help produce an innovative, intrinsically sustainable, and comprehensive master plan to us. Is that better?
Well, that's better. Yeah,
there we go.
That's good.
Okay, I'll keep going. Our very own Jennifer Joost has diligently led the project since its inception to ensure our community and people with interests in the project have been thoroughly engaged and represented in these plans. She will speak this evening about some of the key elements. And we will also hear from Terry Gaiman, our city engineer and GM of Engineering Transportation Services tonight, who helped lead the TMP to its final outcomes. And of course, there are dozens of staff behind the scenes that have been involved in contributing their expertise and professional advice throughout the project, and whose contributions have helped shape this plan. This master plan has been designed to meet the strategic plan goal to provide our community with easy, accessible movement through trails, paths, roads, and corridors to tie the community together and connect Guelph's economy with other regions. The TMP is incredibly timely and comes at an important social and ecological turning point in human history. Climate change, COVID, health, emergency, and affordability had all been top of mind in recent discussions. The TMP policies and actions not only address social issues such as safety, equity, and affordability, but also address environmental and health issues such as climate change and outdoor physical activity, which has proven so critical to maintaining our physical and mental health during multiple pandemic lockdowns and restrictive measures. These stacked benefits ensure that when we invest in implementing this plan, we are making the most of our investments. Council recently adopted the Race to Zero climate change resolution, and it is important to note that this plan already supports the city's efforts to realize meaningful reductions in greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector, of which at least 23%, prioritizing investments in improved transit service and active transportation and supporting electric vehicle adoption. This master plan is a 30-year long-range strategic plan that guides how we will build and operate the transportation system for the entire city. It is the path forward to meeting Council's previous policy commitments as we outlined in May of last year, including the strategic plan, the community plan, the official plan, community energy plan, and others. The opportunity of doing this important work correctly can lead to improved road safety and lower societal costs of collisions, healthcare, climate change, and resiliency. The TMP sets out three key areas for action. Number one, to implement network improvements through the capital budget. Number two, to provide supportive policies to guide future studies, plans, and capital projects to meet the goals of the plan. And three, to enhance or develop new programs to continue supporting the implementation of the plan. The TMP has been prepared under the municipal class environmental assessment process to ensure that future infrastructure projects meet the minimum criteria to proceed for additional detailed study and engagement. The engagement, technical analysis, and background review satisfy phases 1 and 2 of the Class EA study. The final documentation will list a table of all future works that would trigger the Schedule B or C projects and would therefore require additional work that would include public and council touchpoints before construction. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll pass it over to Jennifer to remind us of what went into the making of this plan.
Thank you, Jane. When we launched the study in June of 2019, we inspired the audience with leading experts' views of what the future of transportation needed to consider, and we invited the community to add their ideas and thoughts to start setting our vision. We then gathered thousands of ideas and opportunities and concerns around moving around Guelph through mapping, online surveys, on-the-ground demonstration projects, focus groups, meetings, and workshops. We used this information to develop the problem and opportunity statements and helped define the goals and objectives of this plan. Our technical analysis of existing conditions, transportation modeling, and data projections helped us to understand where we are today and where we need to go, and further helped refine and inform these goals and objectives. Using this information, we set the mode share targets. This was built starting with existing 2031 mode share targets in our current official plan, and then we projected to 2051 using cellular data, census, and transportation survey data. I'd like to point out that we have refined the mode share targets since we last presented to you on May 26th of last year, and this was to better align with the Guelph Transit Action Plan's projections. So you'll now see in the documentation in your packages that the 2051 transit mode share target is 17% instead of previously 15%. And that also corresponded to a further decrease of 2% to the auto mode share target. So instead of 60%, it's now 58% by 2051. Armed with all of this, we prepared and presented the alternative solutions to achieving these targets and goals, and we recommended a preferred network to the community for feedback. But by this point, COVID had forced us to pivot to virtual engagement, and we were fortunate to have our online story maps page, which was easily accessible and connected to our engagement platform. So together with our communications efforts, we achieved strong participation. Council approved the preferred solution last May and directed staff to proceed with the implementation plan, which is what we bring forward today. I was really looking forward to showing you today our public launch of the video we created that demonstrated how we made this plan and how we used community's valuable input. However, I just learned that we're unable to show videos through this platform, so we were able to post it to the project website at www.guelph.ca/TMP, and it's also been shared on social media, and we really encourage you to take 2 minutes of your time tonight or tomorrow and watch the video. As you'll be able to see from that video, which this is just a bit of a screenshot and it won't play, unfortunately, you will have seen that we employed some very innovative and comprehensive engagement strategies throughout this project. And as a result, we're really confident that this plan reflects the needs and concerns of our community. Its innovative and highly interactive approach to engagement resulted in strong participation from all sectors of our community, including youth, seniors, representatives of First Nations and Indigenous groups, businesses, people living in poverty, people living with disabilities, and major institutions such as the University of Guelph. In all stages of engagement, we received strong support for the goals, values, and vision. The 4 engagement memos we've published throughout the project summarize the trending themes and issues that resonated strongest with our community, and I hope you have a chance to look through them. For example, prioritizing transit and active transportation connectivity continued to be a top priority to guide the plan, and it wasn't just from advocacy groups, but from all sectors of the community. Our business community and adjacent municipalities underscored the need for a strong goods movement strategy and continued advocacy for improvements to the Hanlon in order to move traffic effectively. Our First Nations, MTO, which is the Ministry of Transportation, Metrolinx, and educational institutional representatives really valued our commitment to sustainability and greenhouse gas emissions, as well as safety. And their feedback also helped strengthen the policies and network planning of this plan. We heard that affordable and accessible transportation is essential to addressing equity issues, and that we need to communicate through other means than just online to those communities most in need. We even identified some cross-departmental topics that need to find a place in our work plans, such as developing a network of public restrooms throughout the city. We heard that it is important that we ensure the proposed resiliency network should be used in alignment with achieving the policies and mode share targets of this TMP, and not simply to convey more cars around the city. And lastly, everyone appreciated the recommendation to establish a multimodal transportation advisory committee to oversee and guide future implementation of this plan while breaking down barriers between various road user groups. Our lead consultant, Sean Doyle, is going to take us through the key network components of the TMP next. Over to you, Sean.
Thank you, Jenny. Good evening, all. As you'll recall, Council approved Alternative 3, Sustainability and Resiliency Focused Network, as a preferred solution for the Transportation Master Plan in May of last year. This option integrates the priority networks for the 4 most common personal transportation modes, including pedestrians, which also includes mobility assistance devices, cycling, which includes personal micromobility devices like e-scooters, transit, and of course cars. The preferred solution also integrates the network needs for the movement of goods, and it identifies the key elements to maintain network resiliency. Next slide, please. Oh, there we are. The pedestrian priority network represents a network of wide sidewalks and high-quality walking environments in areas of highest pedestrian activity in the city. This includes all of downtown, the intensification corridors and mixed-use nodes, and Gordon Street through the Clare Maltby area. It also has been revised with feedback from the university to include Gordon Street between Stone and College. The pedestrian network is designed to support and encourage walking for people of all ages and abilities. It is complemented by the general sidewalk network and Guelph's extensive trail network. Implementation of the pedestrian priority network involves widening existing sidewalks along identified corridors and improving shade, seating, and other amenities to improve comfort, providing and planning for new crossings of rivers, railways, and the Hanlon Expressway where there are barriers to pedestrian mobility, and construction of facilities to fill in existing gaps along the intensification corridors. Next, we have the cycling spine network, which is a network of streets with high quality on-street cycling facilities. These facilities will be designed to support and encourage cycling by people of all ages and abilities, and can also accommodate emerging modes of transportation, such as push scooters, electric micromobility, one-wheels, and inline skaters. The Spine Cycling Network is complemented by the connecting on-road cycling links to key destinations like schools, parks, and areas of high activity, and of course the trail network. Implementation of the Spine Cycling Network involves construction of facilities to fill in existing gaps along intensification corridors, a higher design standard than painted lanes, such as physical barriers or separation from the road, to ensure the facilities can support cyclists of all ages and abilities, and new crossings of barriers to cycling mobility, such as the rivers, rail, and the Hanlon Expressway. The Quality Transit Network is a network of corridors that prioritize improved service levels and reduce travel delay for buses. These corridors are recommended to be designed with enhanced passenger amenities and to prioritize walking and cycling connections. The network supports the city's existing plans for intensification corridors in mixed-use nodes by connecting these parts of the city with high-quality transit service consistent with the Guelph Transit Action Plan. Implementation of the Quality Transit Network involves transitioning through 3 stages. Stage 1 will be to increase frequency of service and/or optimize schedules in the quality transit corridors. If and when vehicular delay and transit ridership warrants, these corridors could proceed to stage 2, which would include implementation of intersection improvements, such as transit signal priority or queue jumps for buses, where buses continue to experience significant delays. And ultimately, these corridors could proceed to stage 3, which is conversion of general traffic lanes to dedicated transit lanes, or either for different times of day or in an all-day operation on existing 4-lane streets, and or the widening of existing 2-lane streets in the quality transit network to 4 lanes to create dedicated transit lanes. Work under stages 2 and 3 would be subject to further planning and engagement processes prior to implementation. The Goods Movement Network does not currently recommend any changes to Guelph's existing permissive truck network. The TMP does recommend a comprehensive review of the Goods Movement Network beginning next year, and will make recommendations for any changes, policy updates, or regulatory revisions. The Resiliency Network identifies key arterial and collector streets that are designed to be flexible by protecting space in the right-of-way for future uses. This offers the transportation network flexibility so that the city can make changes to improve mobility along those streets in response to factors like changing travel patterns and needs, climate change impacts, societal disruptions like COVID-19, to accommodate new mobility technologies, and more. Since the Resilience Network is focused on future needs, these streets will not require any immediate physical changes. Implementation of the resiliency elements involves protecting for improvements or widenings of select arterial and collector streets through the official plan. These new defined networks are all overlaid, of course, on the car network. the system of major street networks in Guelph. The overall road system in Guelph also requires certain network modifications to improve safety, improve access to developing areas, protect neighborhoods, and manage congestion. Continued implementation of the car network includes continuing to coordinate improvements to the Hanlon Expressway with MTO in order to reduce congestion and improve safety. Continuing to coordinate improvements where the Metrolinx rail corridor crosses the road network to address safety, connectivity, and alleviate congestion. Continuing with the community road safety strategy, speed awareness program, and traffic calming policy. Already, the city focuses significant effort on maintaining safety for cars and auto drivers. The recommendation of the TMP is to continue with these programs and expand them into other modes. To advance the recommended road networks for Clare Maltby and the Guelph Innovation District planning areas, and to implement a transportation systems management program to oversee improvements to signalized intersections and to oversee improvements to localized intersections and network areas. And that concludes the overview of the transportation infrastructure recommendations. I'll pass it back to Jenny to provide an overview of the supporting policies and programs in the TMP.
Thanks, Sean. So in order to support the network improvements that were approved in May, we've gone away and worked on developing a suite of policies and programs. So I wanted to touch on some of the new policies that were recommended in this TMP as they pertain to the 5 core values of the plan. So this slide, you have the 5 core values along the top: safe, equitable, sustainable, tied to land use, and affordable. In the policy book, you'll notice that about half of the policies are reiterations of official plan policies, or they're from the previous Guelph Wellington transportation study that are carried forward and remain relevant for the next 30 years. However, there are a lot of exciting new directions we need to take in order to make this plan a success. Under road safety, we are officially adopting Vision Zero as a municipality. This is mostly a naming and branding opportunity because we already are doing the community road safety strategy, but it means that we can add ourselves to the national and international list of Vision Zero communities and continue implementing our community road safety strategy as the mechanism to work toward this objective. Further to that, developing our own Complete Streets design guidelines beginning this year will also contribute to improved safety, particularly for vulnerable road users. The Complete Streets design guidelines will also help to address equity by ensuring anyone of any mode, age, or ability can get around the city safely and with dignity. No more being dropped off at the bus stops now into snowdrifts or muddy cow paths. We will be upgrading our road designs to include sidewalks and cycling facilities throughout the network. We are also establishing a new advisory committee, I mentioned that before, that is representative of our community and diverse travel choices to help oversee and guide the implementation of this plan. The TMP addresses sustainability policies through a variety of means noted here. New to this plan and in support of feedback we heard from First Nations was policy direction to review and update our road construction practices to seek better low-impact designs. The TMP has to be tied to our land use planning to serve our community, of course. This isn't new, but we have added policies to conduct a roundabout strategy and develop criteria and standards that would be suitable to Guelph, as well as a comprehensive goods movement strategy to continue supporting our local and regional economic needs. Finally, we fully intend to keep this plan affordable and also protect and ensure affordable transportation options for our community. This includes tying the construction projects to our capital budget and asset management programs, avoiding unnecessary road widening projects, and investing in affordable modes of transportation to allow more choice for our community. So these are just a subset of everything that's in that policy book, but the ones that we wanted to highlight the most as being quite new to Guelph. The TMP is also recommending new or improved programs to deliver better service to our community. Resourcing the delivery of better service would require an estimated 4 full-time staff by 2031, one of which will be starting next Monday. The TMP recommends a new road safety technologist in 2023, which is already in the operating budget forecast. A future additional active transportation project manager, which is a few years out, and an emerging transportation technology policy analyst by 2024. The Emerging Transportation Technology Office is a key new program to be established. This originates with our strategic plan and was identified as a gap in services currently offered under Navigating Our Future. For the city to be truly future ready, resilient, and have the capacity to respond and adapt to potentially disruptive changes to how we move around, it's important to have dedicated staff resources focused on this innovation space. These resources were proposed in the 2022 multi-year operating budget for next year, but were deferred beyond 2024, making them subject to future council consideration. Programs also include continuing to deliver sustainable transportation, which delivers on our TDM or transportation demand management measures, cycling and pedestrian plans, our strategic planning, which is our long-term transportation modeling and projections work, and our systems management, such as smart signals and road safety programming. Since the TMP is considered a master servicing plan, it helps inform the official plan updates. We have also made a few recommendations to include in a future OP update that aligns with the goals of this plan and reflect future needs as population and employment grows to 2051. These include updates to road allowances and intersections, updating the mode share targets in line with this plan, and updating the road network schedules. It also includes some policy language revisions in chapters 3 and 5 to strengthen our efforts. These can be found in attachment 4 of the staff report. I'm going to go back to you, Sean.
Thank you, Jenny. I have to say that this plan represents an innovative and leading approach to integrated transportation planning. I work with municipalities across the country on master plans and want to take a moment to outline the many ways that this plan stands out. First of all, it is integrated. Modes are connected and trade-offs are identified. It is outcomes driven. And by that, I mean, we started with the desired mode share targets and worked backwards to determine how we could realistically achieve these objectives. It was driven by public engagement, a public engagement program that was creative and meaningful with strong online participation throughout the pandemic. The climate and emission goals were inputs, not outputs. And infrastructure resiliency and affordability have been key considerations in the evaluation of the recommended solutions. Terry?
Thanks, Sean. We appreciate the industry expertise you and your team have brought to this project. So good evening, Mayor Guthrie and Council. I'm going to provide a brief summary of the financial implications of the TMP because, of course, as we move the plan into action, it's important for Council to understand the costs associated with implementation. As outlined in the report, there are both capital and operating cost impacts for the TMP. In terms of capital costs, staff have estimated the cost of building the TMP into the city's 10-year capital plan by comparing the design standards the TMP creates versus the city's existing 2021 design standards. The results of the analysis indicate that to build the recommended network improvements that Sean spoke to earlier, we expect to add between 0 and 7% in capital cost to any given road project over the next 10 years. The range depends on the design standards and the location and context of each project. If we conservatively applied that top end 7% of the range to the roads capital program, it would represent an estimated $26 million increase to the capital cost of the city's construction projects over the 10-year period. However, As noted, the 7% won't apply to each project, so that estimated 26 million total is expected to be a conservative upper limit. For perspective on affordability, comparatively, in May, if Council would have chosen to add the vehicle travel lanes as per the car-focused alternative 4, the project team estimates that up to $100 million in further funding would have been required. Now, in terms of funding the capital implementation, there are a number of sources, including development charges, grants, and taxes that contribute. The Development Charges Act allows the city to recover between 25 and 100% of the total costs, depending on the location and context of the project. The city procured Watson Associates, who determined that potential DC collections will represent approximately $105 million of funding for these transportation projects by 2031, which represents approximately 56% of the gross capital costs for the road program to 2031. In terms of operating impacts, staff have estimated that the new staff expansions, plus maintaining the projected cycling and sidewalk improvements, would add approximately $326,000 annually by 2031. And it's important to note that by approving the Transportation Master Plan, Council is not approving the capital and operating costs tonight. Instead, Council is approving a strategic direction and guiding philosophy for staff to do transportation-related work. The pace and cost to implement the work will be through the city's multi-year budget process. And to help offset these costs of the TMP, staff will explore alternative revenue sources in the future. These potential revenue sources would be subject to further study and analysis, as well as council consideration, and could include concepts like a new mobility charge, dynamic parking pricing, or demand-based curbside pricing strategies, for example. So, in terms of next steps, after council's approval of the TMP, our team will assemble the final documentation together as part of the municipal class EA requirements. And the TMP doesn't end there. In addition to implementing the policies and programs, staff are planning regular check-in updates to the TMP at 5-year intervals to align with the official plan update schedule. And this ensures that the data informing our official plan is relevant and up to date. Part of the reporting will also be to track our progress on mode share trends to ensure the pace of implementation is meeting our goals. That mode share is the most important indicator of how well we are meeting our climate and sustainability goals, and is one of the ways we measure our success on the strategic plan. And this reporting will indicate whether staff need to adjust the pace or strategy of the implementation and will inform future capital and operating budgets. Okay, so that was a lot of content we covered for council this evening. And so to conclude the presentation, I'd like to bring us back on focusing on the outcomes. By approving the Transportation Master Plan, this is how council puts actions in place to achieve its goals of a thriving and more equitable city, and it's how we execute the strategic plan priority of navigating our future. As you've read and heard tonight, approving the TMP sets the city down a path of developing a transportation network that is future ready, a network that improves safety and equity, a network that supports sustainability and directly works to reduce greenhouse gases, a network that considers resiliency needs to the unknowns of the future. It's a network that integrates with the future growth and urbanization of Guelph, and a network that is affordable compared to the traditional road expansion approach that is controlled through the pace of budget implementation and provides improvements to affordable modes of transportation for the community. By approving the TMP, Council is directing staff to improve road safety, improve choice, and be innovative in the transportation space. And Council is committing to the community that the values identified in the TMP will guide how the city is built moving forward. And for the past 3 years, I'd like to thank you for listening and for your leadership tonight.
Thanks, Terry. Thank you to everyone who presented there. That's great. And Sean, I must say, it's nice to hear an outside consultant say that we're, to this point, a leading document in front of us compared to the other municipalities we've been working with. We're not competitive at all in Guelph, but I must say I like that. So that's good. Let's go to our delegations. We have a few of them on hand, so thank you very much for joining us. And a few of them are by video, some are going to be by phone. You have no more than 5 minutes. I do notice a lot of names that are familiar with our process here, so you probably already know. Just in case there's a couple that don't jump out to me here, I won't interrupt by any means until you get to the 5 minutes. So if you could try to make sure that you stick to that time allowance, we would appreciate it. And then you can always feel free to stick around.
Practice. There is a separate and distinct problem created by cut-through traffic traveling through local and collector roads. The city's response to recognition of this cut-through traffic problem begins in 1973 when the Courtright Hills secondary plan specifically included collector roads with local roads and designated the city's intent to keep cut-through traffic off all collector roads as well as local roads. This was an early adoption of a practice that became much more widespread in the 1980s, and by 1998 had been incorporated in the Canadian Guide to Neighborhood Traffic Calming. The city's response to that Canadian guide was enthusiastic. The city developed a neighborhood traffic management policy that incorporated all of the important indices of the Canadian guide, and in particular set criteria for limiting cut-through traffic on collector roads. After that initial adoption, I am very reluctantly reporting that the city did nothing with it. They have never engaged in a study that included measurement of cut-through traffic and implementation of measures to reduce it. In 2020, the city adopted a new traffic calming policy, which completely removed the cut-through traffic portion of traffic calming from city policy and declared that cut-through traffic is no longer a problem to be dealt with by traffic calming. Now we find a transportation master plan being adopted in which collector roads are included with arterial roads. And the city expresses the intention to encourage cut-through traffic on collector roads under the label of traffic dispersion. I am very unhappy that the city has made that choice. And I think that it would be important for all the citizens to know why that choice is being made in the transportation master plan. So the key questions are collector roads part of the local livable community portion of the network or the part of the arterial transportation network? If they are part of the local network, according to the Canadian Guide, why is the city not following that in its policies? And I think that's well within my 5 minutes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure you were done. Yeah, 4 minutes, 50 seconds. You did it this time. So thank you very much for that. And let me see if there is a follow-up for you before our next delegation comes on. There is not. So thank you very much again. Have a good night.
Okay.
And next is James Fedosov from the Guelph Cycling Club, who I think is also joining us by video. See your name, James. There you are. Yeah, I can maybe just speak up a little bit, but we can definitely see and hear you. Thank you again for joining us. And I'll start the timer for you right now as well. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Guthrie. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, and guests, and thank you for your time. My name is James Fedosov. I am the president of the Guelph Cycling Club, formerly the Speed River Cycling Club. We've changed our name for 2022 as we aim to broaden our horizons in the community. I'm speaking on behalf of many cyclists this evening, but fear not, most of them do walk and drive cars as well. On behalf of the Guelph Cycling Club, I'd like to endorse staff's recommendation that council approves the 2022 Transportation Master Plan. This TMP update makes recommendations for all kinds of infrastructure changes that my organization supports. At the beginning of this year, To better understand our city's cycling population, we asked several staff and the other cycling clubs just how many cyclists are there in Guelph. It was surprisingly difficult to determine an actual number. Jennifer Juice directed us to the StatsCan census data, and as of 2014, 41% of Canadians aged 12 and up reported cycling in the previous 12 months. If we use Guelph's most recent census in 2016, when the population was just under 132,000, we can calculate that we have no fewer than 55,000 cyclists over 12 years old living in town. We can safely assume this is a conservative estimate, given that 8 years have passed and that Guelph, being a university town, likely punches above the provincial average in terms of bike riders. And that's before we factor in the bike boom occurring in step with the pandemic. Why is that important to know? If as low as a third and as high as a half of Guelph's population over the age of 12 is a bike rider in some capacity, then cycling infrastructure isn't just something for a small percentage of our community. It's something worthy of recognition and of investment. And yes, 55,000 plus Guelphites are certainly not all commuting or doing their shopping and errands on bicycles. So what's the missing link, and how do we increase the modal share? Learn and follow the lead of other municipalities around us. Make cycling safe and seamless in the city of Guelph. It's not a case of build it and they will come. It's a case of build it. They're already here and waiting. When one travels to a new city long before they reach their destination, that city makes an impression on them. How difficult was it to get where they're going? How enjoyable was it? How intuitive was it? When I traveled to Montreal or to Hamilton or even to KW right next door, I'm impressed by how much easier and safer it is to get around by bike than what I'm used to in Guelph. When in Vancouver or Toronto, I envy their transit systems. We know we can't snap our fingers and transform our city, but we can start talking and thinking in the same direction. We need all departments to give over to the idea that cycling infrastructure is mandatory the way that curbs and sidewalks are. We need to see more support, grants, and budget allocation for the departments that will be implementing the necessary improvements. COVID completely reshaped the public's recreational and travel habits. We, like many cities, took initiative to adapt and create temporary infrastructure to test and make getting around the city safer and more accessible. There are numerous examples of the positive impact that these fast-acting changes made, and many cities are making those temporary changes permanent. Just last month, Toronto City Council passed a recommendation to keep all active TO lanes that were implemented during COVID and are adding 100 new kilometers of bikeways by 2024. A study led by Ryerson professor Mitra concluded that 68% of all respondents that were sampled across Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver supported future maintenance and enhancements of at least one type of pandemic time street reallocation. The time to be willing to try something new for our city is now. In 2022, we want to see quick, low-cost, low-impact pilot projects, such as turning residential streets into neighborhood bikeways and studying these bikeways using free Strava Metro software to create inexpensive, safe infrastructure for cyclists and pedestrians in the way that other communities have done. Keep the cars moving efficiently out on arterial networks and make the neighborhood streets more neighborly. We understand that this document provides that guidance for the next 3 decades, but there is urgency. We need to begin implementation in 2022 to ensure that we reach a minimum increase of 12% non-auto mode share in under 1 decade. Guelph already has an impressive network of off-road paths that are the most highly used cycleways in the city. We want to see key connections made this year, such as a proper crossing at Victoria Road to the Guelph Lake Trails, the busiest uncontrolled crossing in the city, a G2G that finally connects Goderich and everything in between to downtown Guelph and not just to Martin Road. We want to see money allocated for basic wayfinding along these routes and proper parking and bike infrastructure at trailheads. These are only a few surefire ways to increase that non-auto mode share. When we set targets, we have to commit to achieving them, and we're with you. We're working as hard as we can to support staff and the city wherever we can, even if we don't always agree. But please know that our aim, like yours, is for a better Guelph for everyone. Once again, please support this update and the staff who prepared it. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, James. Again, you and the previous delegate must have both said, I'm going to come in 10 seconds under the limit. So you did it perfectly. It looks like Councillor Alden Galler have a question for you. I'm just going alphabetical here. So Councillor Alt.
Thank you very much, Mayor Guthrie. Thank you, Mr. Fedosov, for your very positive presentation. I have one question that arose as a consequence of discussing cycle paths and cycleways with cycling advocates, and that is, I was wondering if you could please comment on neighborhood bikeways as they might affect or benefit Guelph.
Yeah, so that's a good question. the thing that strikes me with the TMP is that it does call for major overhauls of very busy existing roads like Gordon College and Aramosa as proposed in the spine cycling network. And I, as much as anyone, trust me, would love to see separated bike lanes on those roads and create safe infrastructure there. That's in my opinion imperative to making cycling safe in Guelph. But I think the low-hanging fruit in that regard, and something that we could get done in a very short period of time, would be to create good wayfinding and designate residential roads as bike routes, and do some simple data collection on them. And I think it would be really good bang for the buck as far as staff would go, and I'm sure council would like that too. And it would paint a good picture of, do we need to overhaul roads like Gordon College and Aramosa in order to create a safe network for cycling, or do we just need to separate bikes and cars?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And to Councillor Galler.
Thank you. And to your worship, thank you for your presentation, Mr. Fedosov. I had a question about winter as it comes to bicycling. Part of the master plan talks about having a winter maintained section of our trails, of our main cycling spine. I wanted to get your perspective and your organizations. Is that enough to get people out and bicycling year round, or are we really building infrastructure that is only going to be used seasonally, from your perspective?
From my perspective, absolutely. I don't have solid peer-reviewed data at hand that would support that, but as someone who works at Speed River Bicycle downtown, and I hope I see you in spring for a tune-up on your bike, this winter has been absolutely staggering in the number of people that have found cycling, found especially the off-road routes in Guelph, and learned that they can get from A to B, school, work, whatever it may be, in maybe even a slightly more roundabout way that is so much more enjoyable that they're willing to put their own money towards that. So yeah, to answer your question, I think it's absolutely worthwhile that we maintain those through the winter, and I think you'd be surprised at the number of people that'll be riding on them.
Okay,
And
that is reassuring. Thank
Yeah.
you, because I think oftentimes when we're on the road, we don't see cyclists in the winter, so we think people just don't use their bicycles. But it's good to hear from you that you see it in your clients at work using their bikes in the winter.
Absolutely, and I think it's a case of, yeah, you improve it, and they will just continue to come out in greater and greater numbers. So thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. That's it, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, James. Thanks again for giving us your time, and you yourself have a good night as well. Okay.
Thanks, Mayor Guthrie. Take care.
Yep. Take care. Next on our list is let's see here. Is Ted McKay, and that's from the Family for the Rolling Hills group, and this is going to be by video as well, please. And it looks like Ted's name is popping on the screen. And we'll just wait, Ted, to see if your video turns on, which it has. And can you just check your audio for me, Ted?
Good evening, Mayor Guthrie.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, coming through great. Yeah, good to see you again, and thank you for taking your time again to delegate. I'll start the timer right now for you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mayor Guthrie, councillors, city staff, thank you for once again providing this opportunity for me to speak this evening. It does feel a little bit like deja vu. We were here a week ago talking about the Shaping Guelph report, which I'll remind you, you voted unanimously to accept. As a representative of the Families for Rolling Hills, we presented some objections to you. One of the items we mentioned last week was some concerns regarding the transportation study, which is why I'm here delegating with you again tonight. If I were to predict the future, I think we may be seeing a lot of each other over the next 5 months as this moves to its natural maturation of the city's amendments to the official plan. I have a suggestion as a layperson that may be a benefit to the councillors. Given that last week we had numerous maps that showed the areas of intensification where the city was particularly proposing to increase residential density, the employment areas, as well as the innovation and growth areas, it would have been useful to have an overlay of the master transportation plan maps on those proposed urban uses. I mean, intuitively, you may think that there's just a natural overlay that where we're talking about intensifying, we're also improving or expanding the transportation network. I know with respect to the Rolling Hills area, that's not the case. And I think it would be useful for people understanding how all of these things interrelate if that sort of map was produced. On a similar note, you may recall last week you had 20 delegations from the Rolling Hills area, 10 of us for, 10 against the proposed intensification that was put forward. You'll note this evening that you've got 2 delegations from Rolling Hills. Last week you were talking about land uses and zonings. This week you're talking about some of the nuts and bolts. It's important to those of us that will be remaining in Rolling Hills that the city get all of this right. We're going to continue to live in the city and remain part of the community. The folks that were delegating on the opposing side last week aren't here this evening because they don't plan on living in the neighborhood. They'll be moving out. Now, that's a bit of an aside. I apologize for the editorial. One of the things we noted last week that the city is calling for 800 new dwellings in that area along the south side of Clare Road, Clare and Victoria. Last week we noted that when the transportation study was released, there was no expansion or enhancement plan for Victoria Road South. This gives us grave concerns because based on the report's own findings in 2016, the arterial roads in this area, so Victoria Road north of Clare, Victoria Road south of Clare, Clare Road itself, were already at capacity during peak business hours. So that was in 2016, before the new apartment buildings came online that run along Victoria Road. We're now talking about adding another 800 dwellings to the south side of Clare Road to an area that's already fully utilized and congested. So our concern is it's not consistent with the city's own transportation plans and goals to be adding that kind of, density to the transportation network without doing some sort of enhancement. If you look at the pedestrian schedule that was given tonight, the cycling schedule, the transit schedule, the moving goods, none of them speak of doing any sort of enhancement or improvement of Victoria Road south of Clare. I do note that on the transportation map this evening, Victoria Road South was designated as a truck route. When I drove home this evening along that road, there's a no heavy equipment sign on that road. So I'm not sure how you can use Victoria South as a truck route in the future without adapting its use for trucks or heavy equipment. We don't expect the council to reject the report this evening. Too much work has been done. We are concerned that you're voting to approve it. We would suggest that you should be receiving this report similar to what you did last week and instructing staff to revisit some of the concerns that we've expressed, particularly that you're talking about increasing the density of the neighborhood immediately around the intersection of Clare and Victoria without adequately enhancing or improving the roadways in the area. Can I make it under 5 minutes? I must have. You didn't stop me.
Yep, 4 minutes and 17 seconds, Ted. Thank you very much. And let me see if there's a follow-up for you. There is. Councilor O'Rourke.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Nichols, I'm just wondering if you're familiar with the transit plan that we approved just before the budget, because that did show transit going to Clare and Victoria, and then Clare and Victoria, and then up through Clare towards the rec center, etc. It's in year 10, but I'm just wondering if you were familiar with that.
Yeah. So included in the schedules with the transportation master plan this evening, it shows that they were talking about identifying Clare as a, sorry, I want to use the right words, high quality transit hub. And they were showing the similar sort of use of Victoria north of Clare. There's nothing showing southbound. In the resiliency maps, it's showing that they're potentially going to do some enhancement on Maltby, but there's no enhancement planned on Victoria Road. For Clare Road itself, there's a map that designates that perhaps it'll be widened to 4 lanes. If I was understanding the presentation earlier this evening, it has to get through stage 2 and 3 of whatever studies that the city requires before that'll happen. You're going to have a delegation in a few minutes from another resident of this area just to tell you how bad the congestion is at this point. And we're just cautioning you that it won't be safe and it won't be proper. But to answer your question, Councillor, I am familiar with the study.
I share your concern on the roads, and I'll ask some questions about that later. Thanks.
Thank you.
Quick point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Certainly. Go ahead, Councillor Salisbury.
I just wanted to let you know that I had joined the meeting. I've been having technical difficulties and I'm joining by phone.
Yes, the clerk made me aware. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so over to our council here. If there's a follow-up question, no, Ted, I don't see any. So thank you again
Thank you,
very
Your
much
Worship.
for joining us tonight. Take care.
Good night.
Okay, everybody. Next up is Sandy Nichols, and I think just by the phone. So Sandy, are you able to hear me?
Hi, I'm here.
Great. Thank you for joining us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you're coming through perfectly clear, and I'll start the timer for you now. Go ahead.
Okay, good evening. I have spoken with Sergeant Ray Gordon of the Guelph Police Service many times with respect to safety concerns on Niska Road. Speeds and volume of traffic using Niska as a shortcut from the Hanlon to 124 continues. Fully loaded transport trucks can be seen using Niska traveling from the Hanlon to Highway 124 daily. They are disregarding the current signage. In my opinion, police presence is a Band-Aid solution, and the police can only enforce violations on Niska when call volume and resources permit. The city is growing so rapidly, and therefore, police resources are limited. Current signage is not effective. I'm wondering if the city can install larger signage, the no truck signs. What can the city do to prevent transport trucks from using Niska Road, a small collector road, as a shortcut? How can the city slow down drivers on Niska? I know the city installed traffic calming cushions, which I was very happy to see, but you're still having trucks barreling over them. Pickup trucks and transport trucks don't seem to slow down for those speed cushions. And in my opinion, there's just not enough on Niska. So I'm wondering if the city can look at that. But I don't know what the answers are. I know that I've spoken with Guelph Police Service many times. I know for a fact that, you know, they can only do what they can do with the resources that they have. This is a problem in our area. It's a safety issue for children crossing the road, for pedestrians. We should not have fully loaded transport trucks flying along Niska. So any and all suggestions would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy, for calling in on that. And let me see if there's a follow-up for you, which there is. I'm hearing none and seeing none. So have yourself a good night, and thank you again.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Okay, everybody. The next on our list is Diane Mackey, also by phone, I believe. Diane, it's Cam. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you, Mayor Guthrie.
Yeah, you're coming through really clearly. Thanks a lot for calling in. I'll start the timer for you. You go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Guthrie, councillors and city staff. My presentation is going to tie in quite nicely with Sandy Nichols' presentation, as we both seem to be dealing with the same issues. So as a longtime resident of Whitelaw Road, I would like to remind you about the issues of cut-through traffic on Whitelaw Road needing to be addressed in the Transportation Master Plan. As you are well aware from delegations at City Council meetings on the 361 Whitelaw Road development, cut-through traffic volumes on Whitelaw are already a problem and will be significantly increased once the future high-density development is built at 361 Whitelaw. Present traffic issues should be addressed prior to this development, while future traffic issues should be anticipated and planned for in this area. Here are some neighborhood concerns. The truck traffic continues on Whitelaw Road, and there seems to be no police monitoring of this. They just barrel right down the street. The traffic volume remains heavy. It's difficult and unsafe for myself and neighbors to cross Whitelaw Road to go to the mailbox at Shoemaker because the cars speed up over that big hill and appear unexpectedly from the Paisley Road end. More than once I've had to make a sprint to get across the road safely, especially if I have an animal or a pet with me. It's very dangerous. Instead of using the Hanlon and arterial roads designed for through traffic, Whitelaw, a collector road intended for local traffic only, is used as a shortcut from the south end of the city. Speeding, racing, and that means cars, motorcycles, skateboarders, happens on the straight length of road, and people just love to race down that hill. And especially even in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., we hear motorcycles racing up and down the road. And again, there is no police presence and no monitoring of the speeders. I would like to remind you that Elmira Road, south of Paisley, is a well-designed arterial road. And what is lacking is the extension of Elmira Road to Highway 124, which was promised in the last Transportation Master Plan. I'm asking that as part of the implementation of the Transportation Master Plan, cut-through traffic now using Whitelaw Road be restricted and traffic calming measures be instated. Those are the two really important points, so I'm going to repeat them. Cut-through traffic using Whitelaw Road be restricted and that the traffic calming measures be instated. Residents are depending on the city to make good its promise made in the traffic calming study. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Diane, for calling in. We appreciate it. And let me just hear or see if there's a follow-up for you.
Thank you.
There isn't, so thank you again. Have yourself a great night, okay?
Thanks so much.
Yep,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye. Our next delegation is unavailable, and so we're going to skip to Mike Darman, president of the Guelph Coalition of Active Transportation, I believe, calling in by phone. Mike, it's Mayor Guthrie. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Mayor Guthrie. I'm ready to roll.
All
No
right,
pun
no
intended.
pun intended. Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
You owe me a Coke. All right. Starting the timer. You go right now. Bye.
Okay, good evening, Mayor Guthrie, councillors, and city staff. My name is Mike Darman, and I'm president of GCAT, the Guelph Coalition for Active Transportation. The Transportation Master Plan update is of vital importance to our organization's ability to fulfill our mission, and we are pleased to say that GCAT is in support of city staff's 3 recommendations. We are perhaps at a watershed moment in our history where the decision you make today will have a major impact on many of the strategic plans and goals of the city of Guelph. Besides the official plan update, the AMPU is the most important master plan that has recently become before you for your recommendation. It is by far the overarching document that directly addresses one of the highest carbon emitters in our city, our commitment to the goals of our Energy Guelph Community Energy Initiative, and our very recent council endorsement of the goals of the UN Cities Race to Net Zero in the fight against the climate crisis. It also addresses 2 other current crises facing our city: housing supply and affordability, and equity. Increasing modal share to active transportation and transit are part of the solution to the goal of TMP, but how do we entice people to make the shift to more sustainable modes of transportation? One way is to increase the comfort and enjoyment of these modes closer to that of a car use. We are pleased to see recommendations in the plan for wider sidewalks, connected networks of protected bike lanes, cycle tracks, MUPs, and trails. Vision Zero and reduced speed limits are also vital components of the plan. The recommendation to reconnect neighborhoods that are separated by physical barriers, such as the Hanlon Expressway, the rivers, and the rail lines, is something we've always advocated for. However, we need grade-separated AT with underpasses at busy main arterial locations like the Speedwell Avenue, Eramosa, and Macdonell Bridge. With regards to barriers, we're extremely pleased to see Metrolinx's correspondence encouraging more active transportation routes to the GO station. We've advocated for removal of barriers with grade separation at locations at City View Drive and Margaret Green Park to reconnect neighborhoods. In recent communication with Metrolinx, we have received very good news on fears of further potential railway crossing closures west of the central station. We are also in full agreement with the letter from Dr. Mercer supporting more active transportation, and we fully agree with our recommendations to increase AT and transit modal share in future updates. We would like to see language in the TMP with regards to modal share targets, similar to what is recommended in the 2021 Transform Waterloo Region Report, quote, replacing personal vehicle use for trips under 5 kilometers by using AT to 10% by 2030, 40% by 2040, and 80% by 2050. The shift to more AT should target shorter trips, as most of these trips can be done enjoyably by active transportation in less than 15 minutes. Of course, good land use planning should center around the concept of the 15-minute neighborhood. As more people start to enjoy that short trip to the grocery store, it may also encourage them to commute further, leading to better overall citywide AT modal share. Regarding correspondence from the University of Guelph, we are in full agreement with their concerns for potential road widening to 4 lanes between Stone and Gordon on Gordon Street. Planned protected bike infrastructure is our only concern with their comments regarding, quote, U of G continues to be concerned for the proposed widening for any purpose of the corridor between Stone Road and College Avenue. Transportation planning can help solve the housing supply, affordability, and equity issues. Great AT planning helps with our equity problem, and we have submitted our recommendation additions to the official plan update to city staff. Recognition of active transportation and its infrastructure is essential in the language and definitions of the official plan. Also confirms the city's commitment to making our transportation system more equitable, since not everybody wants or can afford a car. But planning and city developments for more cars means more parking spaces, taking up more valuable space that could be used for more housing and public space, especially in high density and infill developments. Reduced minimum parking requirements have the potential to increase supply and lower cost. At the Breezy Bullhorn meeting last week, I asked the guest speaker, the City of Guelph General Manager of Planning, Krista Walkie, questions on reduced minimum parking on similarly located developments to 120 Huron Street, like the Imico site. She also brought up the concept of no minimum parking requirements and commented that we are not there yet, which begs the question, who is we and when will we be there? 2049? If this sounds familiar, our recent debate on moving targets and goals of our CEI for the city's Race to Net Zero initiative asked similar questions, as did a more pedestrianized downtown and speed limits to 30 kilometers an hour just on our neighborhood streets. The point is we have to start with real climate action sooner is a good day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Right on the dot. Appreciate it. Any follow-up questions? Yes, I got 2. I'll start with Councillor Hoffland, and then I'll go to Councillor Goller, please.
Thank you, Mayor Guthrie, and thank you, Mike, for your presentation. Obviously, you read the letter from the University of Guelph, but I'm not clear through your presentation what exactly your concerns are about the letter.
Thanks, June. I think our main concern is that since their language is so clear that they do not want any widening of Gordon Street at all, like period. We have planned protected bike lane infrastructure going in on Gordon Street from Clare Road all the way to Waterloo Avenue, and that has been funded by the federal government. So it's in the planning works already. So if they're not going to allow even a small amount of space to be taken up, if we need it, for instance, for protected bike lanes, which usually do require a small buffer as well as the actual protection itself, then that's a problem for us, of course. So I'd like some clarity on that, actually. If you could ask staff on that, it would be really helpful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your clarity, Mike.
And Councillor Goller, please.
Thank you, and through your worship, Mr. Diamond, thank you for your presentation. You spoke really fast, and I appreciate that. You got a lot in there, but could you just go back to Metrolinx? I just wanted to touch base on that. Apart from their letter focused on the Central GO station, were there any other points around it, or were you also talking about just the Central station?
Well, first of all, Councillor Goller, that I should be clear on what they said to us in clear and unambiguous language that there would be no further road closures west of the GO station, which is really good news, of course. But their communication of the CMP regarding the interest in improved active transportation to the GO station fits perfectly into the York Elizabeth land use study. And our actually proposal of the extension of the Trans-Canada Trail to Victoria Road has actually the potential for an enjoyable direct route to their station for many of the new developments that are along that line. So I think it's actually a really interesting timing that they're coming out with this draft station access plan very shortly. So I'll be very interested to see what's actually in that.
Okay. Thank you for that clarity. I had another question based on your written submission. One of your points said that we should have a more humanistic approach in our plan. I just wanted to get a little bit of clarity what you meant by that. And it was in relation to getting a mode share split.
Yeah, I think it's again around equity issues that we're talking about here. Obviously, some people, as I said earlier, don't actually want to drive or cannot afford to drive a car. So I think it's all around that sort of issue. So it's just a more equitable issue in this case.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And the same question that I asked Mr. Fedosov, in terms of winter riding, from your perspective, do you feel that we are building infrastructure that would only be used for 6-7 months of the year, or is it that your members are waiting for that infrastructure to be available during the winter?
I actually ride all winter myself. I use the Trans-Canada Trail daily, and the actual service, the level of service on that trail is almost excellent. So I would love to see it, of course, all year. It's not just a matter of clearing at certain times. It's got to be predictably clear for people to actually use it on a regular basis for commuting purposes, because if you don't know if it's actually going to be clear, you may just decide to take your car. It's just because you know the road there. If the trail's, say, too late in the day, which sometimes happens, by the way, then you won't be using it as much. It's also very important, not just for snow removal, but even in the fall, for instance, typically on Gordon Street, for instance, or actually more like on the Woolwich Street end, people will push leaves into the bike lanes, and it creates a real hazard. And sometimes you get an early snow, and when I'm still riding, and lots of other people are riding, and it becomes a real hazard, then you can't even, you can't safely ride in those bike lanes at all, so you tend to veer over into traffic. So it's actually better for drivers too if those lanes are kept clear.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much for the clarification. Appreciate it. That's it, Your Worship.
Mike, it looks like Councillor O'Rourke has a follow-up for you, so stay on the line, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Darman. I thought that staff did a really good job with the stories that they had online, because they were really articulating how lots of people might shift a few of their trips, so they might still need a vehicle to go out on the weekend, etc. And you were talking a lot about equity in your presentation. So if we have to focus, from a budget and a time and a resource perspective, would you recommend that we focus on in-city modal shifts, like kids getting to school, people getting to work, rather than focus on recreational trails? Like, if we have to prioritize, then do you suspect that would actually that's the low-hanging fruit?
It's got to be a combination of both. I think the trail network only works for certain areas. Certainly, like James said earlier, our neighborhood streets are also a great way to get around in some cases. In fact, we have, through a grant from the City of Guelph, hired a PhD student in the geography department at the University of Guelph to create an interactive map where you can actually dial in your preferences to avoid hills, for instance, or dangerous roads. And that we'll probably be producing that map maybe this year, and it would be actually for use by anybody in the city. So this would also create help with the equity issue too, for people to get around, because some people just don't know, the different roads that are available to use that are much safer than, say, main arterial roads.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Mike, again for delegating tonight, and have yourself a good one.
Thank you.
Just before I go to the next delegation, Councillor Salisbury, you're good back on screen and everything? Yep, not on the phone anymore. Okay, perfect. John Fisher is next, president of the Guelph Hiking Trail Club. And it looks like John will be also joining us by video.
Can you hear me?
Yes, John, we can hear you fine. We're just going to see if your video pops on there for us.
Some problem at my end, so let's not worry about it.
Okay, let me just clear my reset my clock. And you've been here before, John, so I'll start the clock now for you. You have up to 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, council representatives, and city staff. My name is John Fisher. I'm the president of the Guelph Hiking Trail Club, representing the club. The club is also an active partner of the Guelph Trail Users Coalition. This transportation plan generally reflects GHTC trail users' concerns regarding specific barriers and connectivity issues. It is very detailed and chock full of good intentions, with the usual caveat that the plan's value is ultimately measured by what gets accomplished. It has the support of the Guelph Hiking Trail Club. I wanted to comment on 3 specific areas where the Guelph Hiking Trail Club priorities and the Transport Master Plan are in general alignment. The first is the Wellington Plaza River Trail. The Transportation Master Plan Policy Book 2.1.1.8 states the downtown secondary plan indicates it is the city's objective to provide a continuous active transportation trail along the west side of the river's edge, west of the Speed River from Royal City Park to Goldie's Mill. The Guelph Hiking Trail Club, in conjunction with Guelph CHC, are working collaboratively with the Parks Department, Art Not Shame, and private property owners to establish a more welcoming trailway between the covered bridge and Wyndham Street along the west side of the Speed River. Engineering and transportation services' active support in this group effort would be very helpful to create that connectivity link. The second area concerns enhanced use of the GJR ROW for pedestrians and cyclists. Transportation Master Plan Policy 1115 states, consider provision of active transportation along active and abandoned rail corridors. 2.119 says the city will support connections to and from provincial and regional cycling routes that facilitates opportunities for tourism and travel to, from, and through Guelph. Those statements were not reflected in Schedules 1 and 2 Pedestrian and Cycling Spine Network maps. The city-owned GJR is not listed alongside other departments as approving the Transportation Master Plan. GHTC believes the GJR right-of-way spine is a key component to moving pedestrians and cyclists around the city safely and changing transportation modal shares in the city. Lastly, linking the OR property, Operations Campus, and GID across the river, Aramosa River. Schedule 2 of the Transportation Plan proposes a cycling spine running through the OR property across a new bridge over the Aramosa River. There is an existing decommissioned heritage wooden trestle bridge that crosses the Aramosa River just upstream of the proposed bridge. The Guelph Hiking Trail Club is leading an initiative with Infrastructure Ontario to repair and restore the bridge, which would provide an economical near-term alternative to the Schedule 2 proposed cycling spine. GHTC would like to encourage Council and the City to support this community-led initiative. This initiative already ticks many of the boxes in the Transportation Plan goals, but also the Trails Master Plan, intergovernmental priorities for 2022, Race to Net Zero, Must-See Guelph Destination, to name only a partial city stakeholder list. In conclusion, the Guelph Hiking Trail Club believes these 3 GHTC priorities not only align well with stated components of the transportation plan, but would make tangible contributions to shifting the transportation plan's goals of increased pedestrian and cyclist modality in the city. We look forward to working together to make them a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, John. See if there's a follow-up for you. And not today, but thank you again for taking the time to delegate.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Stephen Petrick is next. And Stephen, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, from the Transit Action Alliance of Guelph. Sorry, Stephen, I didn't say that. So
No
over to you. You got your 5 minutes if you need it. Go ahead.
The ways people move from place to place and throughout the Guelph region have evolved and will continue to evolve. For centuries, the travel patterns of the region's original inhabitants were tied to seasons and available resources. Early European settlement followed shorelines and watercourses, and roads were built to follow these routes. The advent of railways drew people to opportunities. More recently, private vehicles have allowed people to commute long distances. In response, neighborhood design evolved to prioritize personal vehicle use, putting housing far from commercial use, jobs, other services, and traffic was funneled onto arterial roads. This meant all trips required a vehicle and not just a trip to work. Today, however, there's momentum building for travel options that are sustainable, enjoyable, and healthy. Enabling more people to walk, bicycle, take transit, and use other sustainable modes requires rethinking the design of our transportation system and the design of our communities. The movement of people rather than vehicles is at the heart of this plan. Unfortunately, mobility in Guelph could be heading in the opposite direction as we recover from COVID. If we continue on this path, a very tangible impact would be the pressure to develop more and more automotive-oriented infrastructure, which could cost us upwards of $100 million. The TMP explores and recommends more cost-effective mobility options that meets the needs of residents across the city with a connected, healthy, affordable, sustainable travel suite of options for moving both people and goods through an integrated transportation and land use planning. Complete communities support a variety of lifestyles, enabling people of all ages and abilities and backgrounds to live, work, shop, learn, and play close to one another with multiple mobility options. By focusing on the number of people using transportation corridors rather than the number of vehicles, we could better recognize more efficient, affordable, and environmentally responsible mobility options. In the past, transportation planning focused on expanding road capacity in response to congestion. This typically relieves congestion for a short period, but new capacity attracts more vehicles, which means more road expansions. Managing congestion instead of eliminating it is a better alternative. There's no single solution to solve mobility problems. Taken together, several solutions can reinforce each other. For example, a complete community around transit terminals with walking and cycling trails improves the viability for all three modes. Our group supports Vision Zero. We support the inverted traffic pyramid. We support complete streets and giving priority to buses and transit priority corridors. And we want to see the city start planning now for transit-oriented development around future bus and rail stations. We want the city to be open to supporting temporary projects to transform our streets, to test out and evaluate design options. We support the creation of the advisory committee. However, we do have concerns regarding the methodology of selecting members. We disagree with the University of Guelph's stance on expanding Gordon between Stone and College. We believe the extra space would be essential for transit, which is moving thousands of university students per hour along this area. We support the need to not just rely on Metrolinx to provide regional transit, and we hope the city will consider initiatives like Link to Watershed. The transit quality network, which is along intensification corridors and jobs, is essential. We disagree with the definition of a frequent transit. Our research, including MTO, CUDA, and Dillon consulting documents, shows it's been long established definition of 15 minutes or better, and Guelph is the only one that we found defining it as 10 to 20 minutes. The Transportation Master Plan can truly transform our transportation systems in Guelph. We believe the plan has adopted the correct principles and rightly emphasizes creating streets for people and the integration of transportation and land use decisions with a few minor adjustments as mentioned. This plan seems poised to address many of the barriers that exist for people who walk, cycle, take transit, use shared mobility options, and it will meet our climate goals. We appreciate the time taken on this plan, very long time, and we look forward to working with the city and the community to make the TMP and the future transit master plan successful. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. And let me see if there's a follow-up for you. Councillor O'Rourke has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Petrick. Just a quick question for you. Our employment areas in the official plan and that we've just talked about in shaping Guelph, they're by definition not complete communities, right? And they were identified as having service level gaps in staff's engagement summary. So I'm just wondering if you thought the TMP went far enough in terms of getting people into the employment areas, and in terms of there's no bus shelters or pads or sidewalks there. And I'm wondering what your observations were about the industrial areas specifically.
I think there's a lot of potential, and I think that with the advisory committee, that they could be addressed through that. Or, this could go back for a little bit more consultation, as one delegate said. I say ditto to GCAT, by the way, as well.
Okay, thanks very much.
No problem.
Okay, thanks, Stephen.
Thank
I think
you.
that's it. So thank you so much.
Have a good night.
You as well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Edgar Davidian is next, also joining us by phone. And Edgar, it's Mayor Guthrie. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for joining us. I'll start the timer for you as well. Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Hello, my name is Edgar Davidian, and I'm here on behalf of the Families for Rolling Hills group. I'm in full agreement with my neighbor, Ted Nichols, who, given the time to give his TED Talk, would have been much more stronger in his TMP plan iterations. Anyway, his remarks were on point and must be addressed before any transportation plan is put forth. I don't have a lot to add tonight, but I would like to shed light on the current traffic battles from our perspective living at 3 Megan Place in Rolling Hills. My wife constantly worries when trying to turn onto Clare Road towards Victoria anytime between 3 and 5 p.m. She says it's like playing Frogger at the highest level. And turning left into Clare is near impossible without taking your life in your own hands. This current situation is here, and every day is a challenge without adding another 600 to 800 vehicles while not improving the transportation infrastructure. Without concrete systems, this area will be a parking lot. I've been blessed with 3 daughters, and when my 2 oldest were young, they would cross Clare Road and ride their bicycles safely in our neighborhood and in Clarefields, Westminster. Today, with the volume of cars speeding down Clare Road, it's not safe for my youngest daughter to cross Clare to go to the parks and meet with her friends. And adding 600 cars to an already overcapacity traffic area is going to cause fatal accidents. Finally, our neighbors in Westminster Woods area constantly complain about the difficulty of turning left onto Victoria due to the massive amount of traffic that is happening today. This situation would explode with any intensification in Rolling Hills area. I don't believe the solutions are available to the problems with regards to transportation that are caused by the development in Rolling Hills. The bottom line is evident. Without a clear and evident plan, the solution is to remove the areas of residential intensification along Clare Road. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Edgar. And let me see if there's a follow-up for you. No, there's nothing I see you're here, but again, thank you for taking the time to call in.
Thank you.
Take care. And last we have is Martin Collier, also by phone, residents for a safe Speedville Avenue. And Martin, can you hear me okay?
I can, Mayor. Nice to hear your voice.
Great, we can hear you as well, so thanks for joining us. And you know the drill, so I'll start the timer. You have up to 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, and hope everybody's keeping warm tonight. And I actually have 3 hats on to keep me warm. One is being a transportation consultant specializing in TDM for 25 or 30 years. I'm a spokesperson for the Residents for a Safe Speedville, as you said before, and I'm a citizen cyclist who biked almost 6,000 kilometers in 2021 and wants only the best for Guelph as the city grows to a population of over 200,000. I had a couple of comments tonight. First of all, on the consultation, no doubt, staff consulted the public, and there were a few focus groups, which no doubt helped the plan that you see before you tonight. However, staff never reached out to the residents for, say, Speedvale Avenue, who have a unique perspective on the Speedvale, Emma Earl Bridge, EA, and OPA. We believe an inquiry into these related projects is required to ensure that similar planning fiascos do not occur in other city locations as the TMP rolls out. Our infrastructure, environment, finances, and security issues are too important to ignore as we go towards 2040 or 2050. A few times over the last few years, I suggested that staff meet with a range of local consultants like myself to get professional feedback on the plan. I was surprised this was never done. I am happy to see that staff is recommending a complete streets policy, but as I've said before, I'm concerned that roads may be expanded when we can barely maintain the infrastructure we have, and citizens have clearly demanded that property taxes are already too high. I'm also happy to see that alternative sources of revenue will be in the plan. The comprehensive pay for parking strategies and vehicle registration fees would help out a lot. But what I'm most interested in, and what I've been working on myself since 2008, if not before, is the suggestion that tolling be also looked at. But I have to correct whoever wrote that, road pricing, as I call it, is not emerging. Many different tolling systems have been researched and implemented for decades. Of course, the technology has made these systems more efficient and less costly to implement. The most cutting-edge system is GPS-based road usage charges, which has been legislated in Oregon, Utah, and Virginia. This is a charge that is end-to-end, door-to-door, that we could price people up to about 3 cents a kilometer and see how that influences them. It can supplement or replace the declining gas tax as electric vehicles come on, and you may have noticed the price of gas today is around $1.50, and also reduce transport-related property tax revenues. Also, besides revenue, it can decrease congestion, road infrastructure expansion, and induce demand by encouraging modal shift to transit and active transportation, which is what we want, especially amongst the choice riders, those who have a car like myself, but I also have a bike. I could take transit and I could walk for the shorter trips. It also increased safety. When congestion decreases and the roads are narrow and more human, we can reduce crashes and also potentially the vulnerable community who are walking on those roads. In terms of equity, we reduce double taxation in terms of we don't need to have the property tax, as I mentioned before, or a gas tax because the revenues from road pricing takes that up. And also geographic equity, we don't have people moving from one place to another to avoid charges. It also reduces sprawl and emissions, which we would like to see, especially the emissions side for Guelph, given our climate change goals. This revenue can also be earmarked to complete streets and transit. Transport Futures is actually working with Waterloo-based IMS to demonstrate how this road usage charge could work, and we'd be happy to partner with Guelph and adjacent municipalities on this cutting-edge project. So I'll leave it with that, except to say that I was surprised that the impacts of COVID were rarely mentioned in the 11-page report that I read, but maybe it has been mentioned in other places. So thank you very much for your time and for your continuing work on this. I hope you'll recommend that maybe staff goes back and looks at it a little bit longer before approving it tonight.
Thank you. And let me just see if there's a follow-up for you. And I do not hear or see any, Martin. So to you as well, thank you for calling in.
Au revoir.
Bye-bye.
Au revoir.
All right. That's it for our delegations, and we do. Council thanks you for taking the time to give your input on that before we continue. And Council will also appreciate that I am now going to have a break for us before we continue. Yes, I got one person clapping for me there. Thank you. So what time is it here? 7:38. So why don't we come back at 7:50? All right. We'll a little break, just walk around there, and we'll come back, and when we'll enter into some questions and get to the resolutions. Thank you so much. See you at 7:50. And now I got the headphones on here. I was just talking to myself. There we go. Councillor Gordon didn't hear me say gold star for him because I forgot to put the headphones on. You were the first one with your camera back on, so thank you.
Work. So when I went to attachment 6, the financials, you have figures 3 and 4, and 4 outlines 17 projects that are not included in this 26 million. So with approval tonight, my question is through you, Your Worship, with the approval tonight, are we essentially approving all 54 projects? I think it's 54. Yeah, 54 projects, even though we're only moving forward with 37 and 17 we're not moving forward. Is that correct?
So through you, Mayor Guthrie, to Councillor Billings, the way that staff would move forward would be to take the projects that the TMP recommends and then build them into our work plans and into the capital forecast. So depending on the year, you may see them in that 10-year forecast, or the other projects may be further out.
Okay, but then through your worship, Terry, does that include also those 17 extra projects, which are in figure 4? But those projects are not included in that 26 million that's required in the 10-year forecast.
So through the mayor to Councillor Billings, so I believe the answer is the same. So the work that's shown in the TMP on the whole, if the TMP is approved, then that will be built into our work plans. Now, there are some projects that, for example, we might look at and they may shift around, you know, from one year to another, those types of things. But that's the work that staff would do to go and sort of build that implementation in.
Oh, okay. So if you look under figure 3, again, this is attachment 6, you'll see those are the projects we're moving forward with, which those are 37 projects. Okay, so we need an extra 26 million to move forward on that. Okay, so then what is in the report is here's another 17 projects, which they're saying we may or may not move forward with. But if you take a look at the requirement of that increases the gross project amount by 113 million. DCs would be 60 million. So then that's a shortfall of 53 million. So that's why I was asking you the question with respect to, okay, so we essentially would be supporting or approving altogether the 54 projects, but then staff would have to incorporate those 17 extra projects into the next time we do the DC bylaw. We would have to incorporate those projects, would we not, to collect those DCs?
So through the mayor to Councillor Billings, so yes, certainly the project list would move forward to the DC background study that is kicking off later this year. So hopefully that helps give you some of that confidence. Again, I'll say the timeline at which the projects are put in is the part where maybe there's some nuance here. So that 26 million I was referring to just builds off the existing 10-year capital plan that's already been seen by council. But again, staff will always continue to refine that as we go forward with these inputs.
So then through your worship, then Terry, then because the 17 projects, quote, aren't included right now in the 10-year capital forecast, so then would you be bringing a report forward to council to include them and show them the dollar amount and request council's approval for those projects, because those are not included in this 26 million shortfall?
So through the mayor to Councillor Billings, I think there's two ways that council would see that. One, continued through the multi-year budgeting process, and then also the 5-year TMP check-ins that I mentioned earlier this evening. So that's another place where you might see projects that are a little further out that are maybe in that sort of proposed or potential kind of category, maybe being.
Whoops, I lost you, Terry.
I'm sorry, everyone, I'm having some technical difficulties with my headset. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
you're coming through fine.
Okay,
Yep.
I'm so sorry about that. So I'll
That's
just
okay.
repeat my answer there through you, Mayor Guthrie, to Councillor Billings. I think there's two spots you'll see it. So one's through the multi-year budget, and then the other spot for report back is through the 5-year TMP check-ins that I mentioned earlier this evening. And so that's where you'll see things that might be projects and say that proposed or more sort of future distant, I'll call it a bucket projects at this point. That's where you will start to see those brought in is through either of those reports.
okay. And so then this is a development charge question then. So if we decide to move forward on one of these projects of the 17, and we don't have it in our DCs, can we collect DCs after the fact, or do they have to be built in and put into the DC bylaw before the project moves forward?
So through you, Mayor Guthrie, to Councillor Billings, my understanding is that we can collect DCs for those projects that are identified in the DC background study. So certainly that's the work that staff will do and bring forward to council as we get started later this year. I think I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, and so then with the extra 26 million that's required, because we already have the forecast for the next few years for proposed tax increases. So are we thinking of deferring capital projects so that we're not hit with this extra $26 million increase, or what is staff thinking?
So through the mayor to Councillor Billings, I think the 26 million for one is just a number for perspective for council, and that's sort of a very higher upper end limit, as we've noted. That's sort of a range to where the projects are expected to land. So I think you can expect the true number to be somewhere less than that, but it's very difficult to give you an actual true number based on this plan because of the amount of detail and complexity required to cost it out for each project. But that's the work staff would do. And so once the TMP is approved, we would then go and seek to build those updated costs into the multi-year budget. And just like any budget year, if there were too many competing priorities for the budget, then staff would recommend adjustments. And if staff think that a multi-year budget can come forward as is, then that's what you would see. So it's a difficult question to answer. It's not a matter of, pick project A and delay it for 20 years. It's not that. It would be a holistic sort of comprehensive look through the multi-year budget.
Okay, and then just to be clear, we'll say estimate of 26 million, that does not include the underground utility cost.
So through you, Mayor Guthrie, to Councillor Billings, that's correct. The infrastructure renewal portion is the portion of work that's already there. It's our asset management program. It's all the strategies that are in place. The TMP simply seeks to be another input into that thinking process and that project prioritization process, so that as we're bringing those other key projects forward, how does the TMP influence what the ultimate looks like?
Yeah, and the one thing through your worship that I didn't understand was, and I understand it's every project site specific. However, you would know if with this project, whether or not it's both sides or one side or whatever, you would have to do the underground utility work because it's approximately 2 million per kilometer. So I was wondering why that number wasn't put in the report, because you would know basically how much that utility cost would be.
So through you, Mayor Guthrie, to Councillor Billings, the reason the undergrounds aren't put in the report is really, again, context sensitive for any given project. But at the end of the day, we're really talking about surface level improvements with the transportation master plan. Our infrastructure renewal work, our water, wastewater servicing master plans, all the other types of work that we've got done are the inputs that build in that underground portion. And those costs are included in our multi-year budget forecast right now, based on the best information that staff have.
Okay, thanks, Terry.
Councillor Salisbury, and then Councillor Gordon, you're in the wings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to follow up with some questions that are primarily about Elmira Road and Whitelaw Road. And if I could, I'm referring to the schedules, the pedestrian network and the cycling spine network. Both identify Elmira Road at Paisley as an enhanced pedestrian zone and a intensification corridor or mixed use node. Elmira Road has sidewalks and bike lanes from one extent of the city to the other extent of the city in the north-south aspect. So right from one end to the other, it's a fully functional road, and yet it is not identical. And that those bike lanes actually continue on even into the countryside out towards Elmira. The Elmira Road is not identified in Schedule 2 as a cycling spine network, leaving that intensification corridor, mixed-use node, and pedestrian enhanced pedestrian areas is effectively only serviced by east-west roads. I'm wondering why Elmira Road is not considered as part of the spine cycling network.
Through your worship to Councillor Salisbury, I just want to use this moment to remind everyone, because this is a great question, that the cycling spine network isn't the whole cycling network. It's really just intended to be where we need further enhanced all ages and abilities infrastructure based on a combination of factors such as the land use planning in the area. So when we were doing our analysis, the best north-south route that served from an equity perspective, a land use perspective, connectivity perspective was Imperial Road instead of Elmira Road. And then we also show Paisley as that east-west connection. In 2023, we're going to be starting the update to our cycling master plan, which fills in all the rest of the gaps in the city. And because Ontario Traffic Manual just released a new guidelines and standards book, there's not really a huge difference in the level of service or the design standards that you would see for a road like Elmira Road compared to what we're proposing for the cycling spine network. The new guidelines recommend physically separated or protected for arterial roads, with speeds over 50 kilometers per hour, which Elmira Road has. So most likely when we do go to implement and recommend work for Elmira Road, you'll still see enhanced level of service of cycling infrastructure.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, through you, just two follow-up questions for that. If you could confirm then that the speed on Elmira Road is scheduled to go up from the currently posted 50 from one end to the other. And then secondarily, the other question I have is that this transportation master plan is a higher level plan than the cycling plan. And in fact, the cycling plan would look to reference this plan in terms of not every consideration, but it would be strongly guided by this. Can you confirm those 2 points for me?
Could you repeat the first point for me, please?
You indicated that that Elmira, that one of the reasons, the rationale for not including it as a cycling spine is that the speed limit is 60 kilometers an hour. It's currently 50 kilometers an hour from tip to tail. And so is that intending then that we're looking to see that speed rate increase, or is that criteria not relevant in this case?
Sorry, no, I think that was a misunderstanding. Our master plan isn't recommending any changes in speeds. So
Okay.
the existing posted 50 kilometers per hour is a threshold in the new Ontario guidelines that 50 kilometers per hour or higher would trigger the recommendation for protected cycling infrastructure. And as for the second part of your question, the transportation master plan will give guidance to the cycling master plan in terms of the policies that are in our chapter on cycling. Generally speaking, our cycling master plan network is pretty good, but we will want to update it based on the new standards that have emerged and how it interconnects with our TMP network.
Okay. My reason for asking about this, and it may be a moot point based on my resilience question, but my reason for asking that is that it appears that Elmira Road has the risk of having the existing bike lanes, which were fought tooth and nail for, to be removed. So my question would be, when I look down and I see in the give me 2 seconds here, resiliency network identifies Elmira Road as proposed resiliency widenings. So would that widening put in any jeopardy the provision of bike lanes, or is it a set rule that that's not going to be the case?
The resiliency widenings are to protect space for primarily non-vehicular users. It could be like goods movement or commercial curbside delivery, but most likely it's for things like enhanced active transportation, or in commercial areas for enhanced patio expansion potential. It's the Complete Streets Design Guidelines, which is another component of the TMP that we're starting this year, is also going to make sure that when we redesign our roads, they are complete for all road users. So the short answer is there's no risk of losing the cycling facilities on Elmira Road. They would be designed into whatever future design we have.
Okay. My next question is with regards to Schedule 4, which is titled Existing Permissive Truck Routes. So my very first question is, all of those schedules look forward thinking to me. This one appears to be an analysis of what is existing. Can you speak to what the intent of Schedule 4 is to tell me, and what information, does it relate to where we're going or where we have been? I'm thrown by the word existing, so that's my problem.
Through you, Your Honor, I'm just going to pull that up for myself so I can refer to the same.
Page 80 of 230 in the report, 82 if you're following the PDF numbering. Figure 4 or Schedule 4 of the
Almost there. Okay. Yes, so the existing permissive truck routes just shows what's our current official plan designated truck routes. We didn't recommend any changes through the TMP because it does require a more comprehensive, detailed look than was within the scope of the TMP. So the future goods movement strategy is going to take this and evaluate on a various number of criteria whether these routes still make sense, whether we need to revise or review any of the routes, and look at the policy structure that supports it as well.
So then all of the aspects with regards to permissive truck routes in the city in the transportation master plan are simply a status quo statement and not a visionary, not providing guidance for any future truck route designation?
The existing policies sections in the goods movement are visionary, and there will be further detail that will come out of that goods movement strategy. And some of the recommendations from that goods movement strategy would be rolled into our next 5-year update to the TMP.
Okay, the challenge I've been really looking forward to this document for some time because I get a tremendous amount of calls and talk about trucks on roads like Paisley. Is it Paisley? Yeah. Roads like Paisley accessing the node. And so when I look to this and I see no permissive truck routes, in the absence of giving trucks a permissive truck route, they'll take whatever route is available, and we're getting traffic all over the place. I recognize that if there's more work required to do that, but it was one of those things that I was really hoping to see a little more clarity on with this plan. What's the timing on that work then?
Through you, Your Honor, to Councillor Salisbury, we have that on our work plan to begin this year.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll leave it as a note then that we've got a node that has no truck service according to the TMP. See if I had any other questions on Elmira Road. Okay, so Elmira Road is not going to be increasing in speed. I appreciate that. If I could turn my questions, Your Worship, to the other road, Whitelaw, or not necessarily Whitelaw. Actually, just want to understand. I was talking with staff earlier, trying to understand the designation for collector roads. Whitelaw Road Traffic Calming is looking at this point to reduce the speed to 40, and then will we be reducing the right of way or putting other potential speed reduction factors in place for Whitelaw? Is 40 kilometers, though, is my understanding.
Through Your Honor to Councillor Salisbury, I believe it is part of the road speed reduction program for Q2 or 3 of this year. And my understanding, well, we're not reducing the right of way. The road design for that road construction piece is underway and will include active transportation facilities. And Whitelaw is also on our priority list for traffic calming measures. And it just remains to be determined whether it's done this year or in a future year based on how quickly they can get through their prioritization list.
Okay, no, thank you for that. I'd asked some earlier questions.
And Councillor Salisbury, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Sorry about that. Just to let you know, you're getting a lot of time on this already. I do have a lot of list here, so just wondering if you could try to focus your questions as quickly as possible without the
myself, if that helps.
Without the preamble. Just get to the questions, and then that way we can get as many people in. Thank you.
This question might be most appropriate for Mr. Gaiman, as it's a response to some of his email answers that I received earlier. Just curious as to what the right of way is for Whitelaw right now.
Through you, Mayor Guthrie, to Councillor Salisbury, I would need a minute to look that specific up, but I do believe that it is a 26-meter right of way. I would need a moment to be able to confirm that.
We can come back for that. The other question I had was the criteria. One of the criteria you mentioned for designation of a secondary route is the official plan, and then there was also the highway traffic guidelines. It speaks in the official plan to a collector road having moderate speed, and to me, I would assume that to be at least 60 kilometers an hour, and we're going to look to take it down to 40. So is that just simply on that criteria, just not missing the mark on the designation for a collector road being moderate speed, 2 to 4 lanes?
So through Mayor Guthrie to Councillor Salisbury, I think simply Whitelaw meets the definition of a collector road at this time, and certainly as things evolve, staff do continue to look at those changes in the future, right? If speed limit changes, if right-of-ways change, all the types of things that we're discussing today. And if that ever took something and changed its classification, then that would be something we would certainly update. But at this point in time, it's a collector road.
I appreciate that, Mr. Gaiman, but with all due respect, my question is that by the definition that we have that you've provided for collector roads, and the official plan requirement of be moderate speed, 2 to 4 lanes, it sounds to me that we're going to be below that threshold, at least on that designation, and I'm concerned that it doesn't. Ultimately, I'm looking at perhaps bringing forward a motion to remove it as secondary classification. So when I hear it going down to 40, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that aspect of it still being a collector road.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Salisbury, I think, like I said, at this point in time, from staff's perspective, it is a collector road. In the future, I think that's something that we can continue to look at as things change, but for now, it's a collector.
Okay, if later on we could circle back on that right away confirmation, I appreciate that. That's it for me, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your gracious time.
Thank you. Let's go to Councillor, I think it's Gawler, then Gordon, please.
Thank you. And through your worship to staff, I wanted to revisit the question raised by several of the delegates about cut-through traffic and the connection between the definition of the resilience network of arterial and connector streets. Could you just please clarify for us that how we're going to prevent cut-through traffic and that this plan is not actually going to add to that issue?
Through Your Honor to Councillor Gawler, cut-through traffic is not something that's easily measured. We don't have a direct link between cut-through traffic and direct safety impacts. It is more of a perception issue a lot of the time, and it does contribute to volume, which we do measure, and we can monitor from that regard. In terms of the proposed road hierarchy that's recommended in the official plan, we're following the directions and the guidelines of Transportation Association of Canada for how they define a collector road versus a local road or an arterial road. And the key element of that is the function it plays in the network, which is to take people from the local roads to the arterial road network. There are a few locations in Guelph where it's true that the collector road connects an arterial to an arterial. And in those cases, it's possible some people might avoid a traffic jam to get around it. It's really hard to control for that. So we will have transportation demand management programs and policies that look at the behavioral side of how people move around in the city. We also have our transportation systems management program, which looks at things like signal synchronization and smart signals, and our road safety programming to help continue to move traffic efficiently to help reduce the need for that. And then our road hierarchy system is designed in such a way that it's consistent across Canada. It functions in the Guelph context, and it carries people to where they need to go as efficiently as possible.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So if I can just clarify, on page 7 of 18 in the recommended directions for updating the official plan, when we talk about the definition of the resilience network, that is not to say that we're lumping together arterial and connector roads. It means that for both of those roads, we're going to add more of the non-vehicular flexibility. Is that correct?
Through you, Your Honor, to Councillor Goller, the resiliency network only is applying to existing arterial roads. We aren't proposing the resiliency network on any collector roads. And the purpose is really to provide that flexibility in our arterial road network to accommodate future change, whatever that might be, and it would be subject to emerging information. So I'm not sure I understand the connection with cut-through traffic and collector roads.
Well, I think the confusion there is that it actually says a network of key arterial and collector streets that are designed to be flexible. And I think it's just putting them together. That was just a confusion for me.
Oh, I understand. Okay, thank you. I think that's a wording correction that we can make to clarify that.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And on one thing you mentioned, the programs to help people with behavior change. How much of that will play into this? As one of the delegates said, there's people that are already use active transportation and bicycling. So from staff's perspective, how much work is going into the physical infrastructure, and how much will go into that other behavior change work that needs to happen to get people to use those alternative methods of transportation once they have been built?
Through you, Your Honor, to Councillor Goller, the Transportation Demand Management Program it will be enhanced and improved. We're starting to write the terms of reference for an overall TDM strategy starting this year. And the intent of that is to really leverage community-based social marketing data, so data and surveys on how people move and what their barriers are, to develop Guelph-specific programs and services, incentives to support the infrastructure that we're building. So it's hard to say what proportion it will be. Behavioral work doesn't cost as much as physical infrastructure, but we do have currently one staff who does work exclusively on TDM. And through that strategy, we hope to see more details come out and identify what the best strategies will be to implement in Guelph.
Thank you very much. Those are all my questions at this time, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. Gordon, then O'Rourke, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Wardmate Goller, for asking the first question I was going to ask already about the cut-throughs. I have a couple of questions. I'll stay with my wardmate for a second, too, and he will recognize one issue that comes up in Ward 2 a lot around the designated truck routes. As you know, on staff, there's a lot of truck traffic through the main arterial roads that pass through Ward 2. None of them really are designed for it. It's always a stressful position. However, most of the concerns we get from residents are not so much about the choice of route, it's about the enforcement in them. And it makes me wonder what correlation has already been made in the preparation of this report between planning routes and the enforcement of them. Has there already been a collaboration, for instance, with GPS around that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gordon. Our preference is to design the road effectively to minimize the need for enforcement. For the goods movement strategy, that's going to be one of the considerations we want to look at is what does a road need to be designed to in order to safely accommodate trucks, especially in the context of other priority networks that they may operate on. And then we are also simultaneously starting our Complete Streets design guidelines, which will look at developing some Guelph standards that will take that into consideration as well.
Good. Thank you. I think that makes sense. In the incredible document, it's an amazing work. There are a couple places where considerations are mentioned rather than plans. In other words, we could do this, we could do this later, we couldn't do it later. I'm thinking, so it makes it a little bit difficult to make a decision on approval when we're not sure on some of these hazy areas. One of them, I'm talking specifically, on page 9 of the report, it mentions a consideration for more public washroom facilities at major traffic stations. I hear about this quite a bit. There's a demand, especially for our downtown station. What's the mechanism, or what do you need from council to get past consideration to, yes, we're doing this?
So through you, Mayor Guthrie, to Councillor Gordon, I think the mechanism is approving the TMP, because what you've then done is told staff that we do need to go look into those considerations. And so each in any given topic requires additional study. It requires potentially community engagement, depending on what it is. It depends on a number of different factors, but the approval of the TMP puts that on staff's radar and then asks us to go and do some of these things. Something like public washrooms, I believe, is already on our facilities and energy management group's work plan. So that one you might not see specifically here, but for the rest of those, the TMP moves us forward.
Thank you. So it's kind of, we're approving tonight a living, breathing document, I guess, right? So as things progress, we as council could notice, okay, this was up for consideration. When can we see more specifics? Another quick question. On page 124, there is a allusion to managing peak period congestion without increasing the physical size of the roadway. And in other places in the report, there's actually a chart of where it's being considered to increase the physical size of the roadway. So tell me how you balance that. It almost seems like in conflict with itself, those two statements.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gordon. The reference on page 124 is specific to the fact that this plan does not widen roads to accommodate more lanes for cars. We want to continue to accommodate our existing portion of cars within the road infrastructure that we have. What you see in the official plan memo, where we've recommended some right-of-way widenings, is in order to accommodate the ultimate cross-section needed to now include active transportation. In some places where we have a 2-lane arterial where we need to widen to 4 in future for potentially that stage 3 of the quality transit network. So we did some conceptual cross-section work to give us some ideas of what kind of road widths we'd be looking at, and in some cases it exceeds what we currently have in our OP.
Thank you. I think that makes sense. One last quick question. It was alluded to by one of the delegates, and I had questions too, where there was a reference to the possibilities and options for congestion pricing. It wasn't elaborated on too much. Can you say a little bit about that for us?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we would like to consider future funding sources. If in our future update in 5 years, we see that the pace that we're currently building at isn't delivering on the goals and the indicators that we'd like to see by that point, we may say, okay, we can add more work and develop the network faster. And if we can't pay for that, here are some options for us to consider. Congestion pricing is tricky because I don't think it's currently permitted under the Municipal Act for a municipality. So we'd be looking at things that are within our jurisdiction and powers to explore.
Okay, thank you for that. Oh, sorry, I'm going to slip in one more question. Roundabouts or traffic circles were only very briefly mentioned. I wonder if you can tell us how much of a plan or projection that would be to solve some of those congestion issues.
Through you, your mayor, to Councillor Gordon, we do recommend a roundabout plan or strategy or study that would help identify what kind of criteria would trigger considering a roundabout for Guelph, like land uses, traffic volumes, that sort of thing, and then identify some areas where it might make sense, and also looking at the design standards that would work for Guelph. So that kind of work would probably be, you know, a 1-year study with engagement. We'd want to make sure it's designed for the type of road users in the network. Some might be along goods movement corridors, for example. They would have a different footprint than if it was in a residential area. But there is potential for that to address traffic flow and congestion. We just need to study it further to understand where it would help best.
Terrific. That's all for me. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, could I jump in regards to the washroom question? Just to tie
You don't
the
have
loop
to
up.
go. Is that where you're jumping in?
I do not have to go right now, no. But
Go on.
through the mayor to Councillor Gordon, just to tie the loop a little bit on the washroom. So that does involve numerous departments, as you can imagine, throughout the city, mainly through facilities and also through our ACTEV group. So we are taking a look at that and try to figure out what a plan might be in terms of moving forward. But certainly the transportation master plan and other plans associated with the downtown and our planning groups will help inform that study going forward. So there'll be more to come on that.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. It is Councillor O'Rourke's time, and Councillor Caron, you're in the wings, and then your ward mate after you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to staff. I spent an hour and a half with them last week going through lots of details. So just a quick question for clarification for me and for folks who are listening. So Ms. Just, when you answered Councillor Gordon, you told him the resiliency network widens only for active transportation or transit or curbside use. But can you confirm for me that if a road or an intersection needs a level of service improvement, and if it's listed in the OP tables that are in attachment 4, that those enhancements, turning lanes, widening, whatever is required, can still happen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor O'Rourke. I don't want to confound the two with the resiliency network. What you're talking about are studied indications where there's a road safety concern or a failure of an intersection from a traffic flow perspective. And we would consider enhancements based on the data available. We would consider it in the context of the priority networks of the location, so it would be very context specific. So if you want to use an example such as Gordon and Arkle, we would look at it in the context of how does it work with transit priority and how does it interact with the cycling spine network and how much space do we have available, and we would try to find a solution that best meets all of those needs, with road safety being our #1 priority. So no, it does not preclude those enhancements from happening.
Okay, and just to follow up, so how would you determine the timing on that? This is a 30-year plan, but some intersections are failing now. So does that intersection have to wait until the other elements are in place for the level of service enhancement that's required?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that our road safety strategy would not make us wait. We would want to address those at the appropriate time. For example, we do have the Gordon Street work happening. It's on our capital budget. It's been identified based on studies and data that we need to provide a center turning lane and a transit queue jump lane at Arkle Road. So that's an example of where a priority to do some work was identified. We did the studies. We put it in our capital work plan as soon as we're able to get all the information ready for the detailed design.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, just a couple more. I just want confirmation from staff. The Transportation Master Plan talks about AAA cycling infrastructure on all collector roads. Can we just confirm for me that the collectors won't automatically have a AAA cycling, that it's going to be done over the next 30 years, likely first in new subdivisions? Because my concern is that all of that could eliminate some of the on-street parking before we've had a transition. So again, it's timing in terms of the mode share. So can you just give me some comfort around how that rolls out in existing neighborhoods?
Thank you again through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor O'Rourke. The TMP gives us the guiding vision. So when a road would come up for a reconstruction, be it arterial or collector, we would look at the network priorities identified in this plan and the policy guidance, and that would help. That would be on input to inform how it gets redeveloped. So most of the time, whether all collectors are going to have it now or not, it just depends on the capital budget program, and there's other factors that influence the timing, including asset management or, emergency underground repair works. We would do our regular studies like we typically do, engagement, and collect feedback on potential design options before we implement anyway. So again, context specific, it would just depend on the location and the community's needs and the needs of the network.
Okay, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I have two more questions. You've mentioned a few times, or staff have mentioned, that you're planning 5-year check-ins on the TMP. And so where is that embedded in the policy documents that we have? Is that written in stone? And I raise it because we've got a 30-year-old zoning bylaw, we've got a 15-year-old TMP, and I'm sure there were best efforts and best intentions at the time, but I just want to know where that is in the policy document.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe it's in the implementation chapter where we have a section on reporting and funding. I'm just looking to see if we put in, yes, so 6.2.1.1 commits the city to continuing to participate in our Transportation Tomorrow survey every 5 years, and that will inform our updates to the TMP.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, does that mean that once you do that, you come back to council to present that?
Yes, so the Transportation Tomorrow survey timing is lined up fairly decently with the OP updates that we need to do every 5 years as well. So it gives us an opportunity to take that data, validate it against our population growth targets and employment growth targets, and make sure that our network can still function based on the new information. The timing of this one was a little awkward. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get the data for the 2051 employment and population projections to inform this plan. So as soon as that's available from our planning department, which should be shortly, we'll be starting to do that update just to make sure that everything beyond 2031 is still valid.
Thanks. The last one, Mr. Mayor, I know I'm on the clock, but I just want to hear from staff. Staff know that I have a concern around 3.1.1.1 of stage 3 of implementation of the Quality Transit Network. I have a motion where I'd like to add and council approval to that clause stage 3. So what is the hesitation of coming back to council to get council approval when you want to activate dedicated transit lanes on Gordon or elsewhere? What is the hesitation of having to come back to council to show us the data and to get the go-ahead?
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Rourke. I guess for us, what we are a little bit concerned with would be the timing of that council approval. A lot of times when we're doing these bigger studies, as you could hear from Jenny when she was doing her presentation, that check-ins with the public and check-ins with council are really baked into the process. So we always come back and check with you as we are going along with our project, because as you can imagine, very concerned that we might go through the whole process, spend a lot of money doing consultation with the public, with our partners, consultation costs, and then coming and then all of a sudden at the last minute, something gets rejected by council. And so we're trying, that was really our concern, is with the timing of that council approval. We feel like, you know, with all these bigger projects, as I said, that we would have that baked into the process anyway, where we would come in and check in with council as we were going along with that process. So that was the concern, was having the need for council approval after we've already gone through that very extensive process.
Thank you, Ms. Holmes. I hear what you're saying. I still have a motion, Mr. Mayor, because I think a decision on a huge level of service change like that should come to council. I don't know if you would like the amendment now or if you would like it later.
Yeah, why don't we just deal with it as we go? We can deal with it now, because I only have Karan and then Downer anyway. So, and I know that I had Councillor, I think Downer has something potentially based on some questions that maybe she might want to bring forward. And I also had written down Councillor Salisbury as well. But why don't we just deal with yours right now?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Just 1 second, Councillor O'Rourke. Yes, the main motion was put down on the floor at the beginning by Hoffland and Gawler, I believe, was seconder. So this would be the first amendment. Yeah. Okay, over to you, Councillor O'Rourke.
Thank you. So if folks are following along at home, I'm on page 54 of 232, or the policy recommendation document. There was attachment 3, policy recommendations. So I will have a motion forwarded to clerks to amend policy recommendation 3.1.1.1 and attachment 3, policy recommendations of staff report IDE 2022-02 to add the words "and council approval" so that the amended motion reads: Stage 3, conversion of general traffic lanes to dedicated transit lanes on existing 4-lane streets, and are widening existing 2-lane streets to 4 lanes to create dedicated transit lanes where delay and ridership warrants it, according to Guelph Transit performance metrics, subject to environmental assessment studies and council approval.
It looks like it's seconded by Councillor Billings, I think. Okay. And
The reason
I was just
Sorry,
trying to, don't worry, I'm not keeping time on this just for your sake, Councillor O'Rourke, because I'm interrupting you. My apologies. But I was actually just scrolling to page 54 there. Did you have it up on the screen, Dylan? Yeah, you did. Could you put it back up for a second? Sorry, everybody. Just want to make sure I'm kind of just catching it on the right page that I'm on. Conversion. Okay, I see it here now. Okay, over to the mover of the amendment before questions, and I think I saw Councillor Karan's hand go up for a question, or was I wrong on that? No, okay, sorry. To the mover, and then to Councillor Gawler with a question.
Simply put, Mr. Mayor, we're going to invest millions of dollars in adding a center turning lane on Gordon Street. so that there's a better flow of traffic. Our population has increased significantly, will continue to increase. Many of those people will have vehicles. They're likely to substitute some, but we need to address existing issues on Gordon. And when we have those standards set by transit to say we need dedicated lanes for transit for a portion of the day or for the entire day, I think that decision to then remove 2 lanes of vehicular traffic on Gordon is a huge decision. I don't think people suspect that it's sort of, in the transportation master plan. It's a huge decision. It affects, on average, 26,000 drivers a day or vehicles a day. And I believe that that decision at that time should come back to council with the justifications, and we will probably approve it. But I think it's our democratic responsibility to be hearing from people as well, over and above the staff consultations. And I think a big decision like that is a council decision.
Thank you. Questions on the amendment only? Councillor Goller.
Thank you, and through your worship to staff. I understand the rationale for this motion, but I wanted to hear from staff. You had previously said that there could be a negative impact with the amount of work that staff would have to do in advance, and then council potentially saying no to something. I've also heard from constituents saying that maybe adding those dedicated bus lanes will not give us the desired result. So would part of the work that you do provide modeling that sort of guarantees the result, or is this a case of build it and they will come? So if you can just get a clarification on that, what sort of work would go in advance to prove that we would get the results if those changes are made, so that when it comes to council, is there scientific rationale that it's going to work, or is it a political decision?
So through the mayor to Councillor Goller. So as Jenny was going through her presentation, she's talked about when we start looking at the different stages on how our roads might be improved. One of the things that they talked about was having data and having warrants before they start moving into the next section. So that would be presented, and we would use that data in discussions with council in order to provide a recommendation before we go to the next stage of improvement. I don't know if Jenny or Terry have anything additional to add.
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Goller, just to build on what DCAO Holmes said, through the Guelph Transit Action Plan, they have made a commitment to council to report regularly on how the performance standards are being met. And there's an opportunity through that reporting mechanism to start at least flagging where we're starting to see the service levels slacking or not being met, and have that conversation about whether this would trigger moving into the next stage of the quality transit network improvements. Remember, stage 2 is in between right now and stage 3, and stage 2 is transit priority measures using our signal systems and queue jump lanes. So stage 3 really is at the end of the line, and there will be opportunities through transit, through our 5-year TMP updates, and through any road EA projects that we would do that we would report back to council.
Okay. So you would be reporting back to council either way before these big pieces of work get done. But the difference with the motion would be that you would be reporting to tell us what you're going to do versus reporting back to ask if it can be done. Is that how you understand the motion? So all the work is going to go in advance, all of the research and the studies, either way, right?
That's correct, Councillor Goller.
Okay, thank you.
If I understand your question, yes, that's correct.
Now that when it gets to that point, which is the end point, as staff have just said, it will be highly justified already. And the fact that we're talking about 4-lane roads that either are existing where one needs to become because it's warranted as a dedicated bus lane, or other roads where they're going to be expanded to 4 where one would then be warranted for a dedicated bus lane. I think it's important that we allow that process to continue. And the process as laid out by staff have indicated that we will be kept in the loop. There will be engagement. There will be times where this is discussed with the public. And so my final concern on this is that we would, as Deputy CAO Holmes indicated, that we would be sending people away to do a ton of work, a ton of engagement on it, and a ton of data gathering that would end up warranting it if the data said that, and then potentially coming back and being killed. Then that to me does not seem like sort of the vision of transportation. And I think that we need a city by 2051, not tomorrow, but by 2051. And furthermore, it does seem in conflict with the approved plan for the transit vision that was just enacted as well. So there's a lot of conflicts with it, I believe, and at the same time, I feel that staff are indicating that there's check-ins. And so with that, I think I'm not going to vote for it at this time because I feel satisfaction that we'll be able to comment it at another time. I'm sorry, I see Councillor Alt's hand before I call the vote. Go ahead, Councillor Alt.
Thank you very much, Mayor Guthrie. I completely agree with you. And with all due respect to the mover, I am very concerned that there is something that is somewhat problematic with regards to governance on this. And that is that I think we're stepping into the realm of both micromanagement and the potential for obstructionism. It is our responsibility to approve actions. And that is something that we can do. But in the interim, in the period in which staff is contemplating action, I think we need to be very, very careful that we do not overstep the line of being responsible politicians versus being civil servants.
And I'll go back to the mover at the end. I think that's only fair. I see your hand, Councillor O'Rourke. Thank you for your patience. Councillor Salisbury, saw your hand first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With all due respect for my colleagues, I have to support the motion for the following reason. There are frequently staff reports that are well researched, well documented, and well grounded in their opinions that this council and previous councils have decided not to pursue. Several high profile ones, water supply master plan that excluded a pipeline. That's a big one, I know. Stone Road crossing the river and creating the ring road. That's another one. But there's numerous examples where there are aspects of the perspective that their elected representatives who represent the community, who hear from the community, that bring forward that may not make it into the decision-making matrix of a staff report. It's just the divide that it somehow happens, simply leaving a simple final checkbox that says, in addition to all of these reasons, this is why we believe this is correct, and having council sign off on significant capital investment. I don't see a problem with that.
Thank you. And to the mover of the amendment, you definitely are owed the last word. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So staff are telling us that they will have the data anyway, they will check in anyway, and all I want to do is to put it in writing, because we will not be here, some of us, in 5, 10, 15 years, and maybe that's when we decide it's time to pull the switch on dedicated bus lanes on Gordon Street. And so council, I think, at that time has every right to be brought up to speed on here's where we were, here's where we are, here's why the time is right. And I think that the decision on timing is a decision that should have some council input. And to Councillor Salisbury's very good point, every policy decision that comes to council, all the master plans, we get to vote yes or no on trails or transportation master plan. And theoretically, we could vote against something that has all that research, all that consultation, because things have changed 10, 15 years down the pike. And all I'm asking is for council to reserve the right to do that and to put it in writing.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Okay, so I got Billings and O'Rourke and Salisbury and Curran and Downer and Bell. And all those against the amendment, please raise your hand. So Guthrie agenda item. And it allows delegations. It allows everything that you're looking for. Anyways, I'll leave it up to council right now. I'm going to count to like 1 or 2 here. Councillor Bell, did you want to move a motion like that?
Sure.
Would someone like to second it? Councillor Salisbury is willing to second that. So let's use the same language to the clerk. If you don't mind, I'll just help us get through this for 30 seconds and we'll get up on the screen and we don't need to discuss it. We can just take the vote. I think everybody, and wherever it lands is fine. That's fine. We'll move on. If you could please just pull it up on the screen for me and I will just help with the language and Councillor Bell will send that email to you in a second, but I do want to try to get through this because we have a couple more amendments and a couple other questions as well. So instead of conversion, blah, 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 whoa. Okay, I can see that. Yep. Conversion of the John Time was in last line transit performance metrics subject to environmental studies and that this information be provided to council through an information report. Just not just information and information report. Yep. Councillor Bell, are you okay with that? I can't see you on the screen, Councillor Bell. Could you just say audio if you're okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And is the seconder, Councillor Salisbury, you're still okay with that? Yes, okay. Then I'm just going to call the vote, okay, everybody? So all in favor of this amendment, please raise your hand for me. Okay, is anyone against? Okay, it's unanimous, and we'll get Councillor Bell just to follow through on the process on sending that to you later, okay? We'll just continue to move along. Thank you, Councillor O'Rourke, and thank you, Council. It's we landed on something as a team. That's good. Councillor Curran, you are next, and then Councillor Downer is in the wings.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. All the best questions have already been asked and answered, so mine are really minor. But anyway, a great body of work. Congratulations to staff. One of the things that we have heard through previous surveys, previous research, or maybe it's just previous research we've all done or personal experience, is that the user experience of a pedestrian determines whether or not you choose to be a pedestrian and the route that you travel. And speaking specifically of shade trees, and I know in the TMP manual, you have a section on the TMP policy book, implementing quality design. There's only one mention in that comprehensive document about street trees. And I think it's 1.2.2. So my question is, street trees, is that part of our TMP or is it part of our urban forestry? Is it in our capital budget as a TMP item? Or street trees is just mentioned in here as a design feature, but it's not part of any of our financial modeling or budgeting for implementation of the TMP.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Curran, it's a great question. The Complete Streets Design Guidelines is where we will identify and determine where and how we can accommodate trees in the road cross-section, and pedestrian priority networks. It's definitely mentioned as one of the features that contributes to the improvement of that environment for pedestrians. So it would be higher priority to try to maintain street trees and constrained corridors if it's also identified as a priority pedestrian network. We would also be working in consultation with our urban forestry staff as we develop those guidelines to make sure that we're meeting all of their requirements and that the placement and the space that's allocated in the cross sections will support the health and well-being of those trees. and we'll do our best to include them as much as possible. It is tricky. The more we try to compete for that space, you know, the more we have to look for compromises, but it's definitely one of our goals is to continue to include street trees.
Okay, and I think you've partially answered the second part of that question was the road widenings that are kind of identified in this plan talk about a 2.5 or 3 meter widening to a 5 meter widening, depending on whether it's for transit bus or pedestrian or trail or separated lanes. Do those widening numbers include adequate boulevard for street trees and snow removal and green infrastructure and all of the other things, or are those widths just from the ministry policy book?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Carant, we have done a very high-level conceptual cross-section for various types of roads in Guelph to give us some costing information. And in those cross-sections, we did account for space in the boulevard for what we hope will be enough snow storage and street trees and boulevards and all of that. But that information will need to really get refined and detailed out through the Complete Streets Design Guidelines.
Okay, great. Thank you. You mentioned in the opening presentation in terms of engagement and data collection that you used cell phone data. And I'm just wondering if you could further explain what that cell phone data was used. Was it origin destination studies? What did the cell phone data in particular give you? And what was the volume of that? I didn't see a kind of breakdown in the report.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Caron, we used a product called Streetlight Data, which uses cell phone information on travel movement. I'm going to defer the details to our consultant, Mr. Sean Doyle, who can probably explain the technology better than I can.
Thanks, Jenny. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the Streetlight data platform collects a bunch of cell phone information using the GPS information that's in all of our cell phones, and it helps us to track. We use it mostly for origin destination patterns, as you suggested, Councillor, to help us to understand. You know, you're leaving downtown and you're headed to the university, or you're leaving Clare Maltby and you're headed to a job up in the Northwest, to help us understand sort of the proportion of trips that are moving from between different parts of the city. But one of the key pieces of information that it gave us as well was because we knew where people were starting and ending, we could do an analysis of the average trip length for trips that were being taken inside of Guelph. And then that information showed us the significant unrealized potential for walking and cycling within what is already happening in Guelph, based on sort of typical trip lengths of about 2.5 kilometers for walking trips and about 7.5 kilometers for cycling trips. So we took that streetlight data that we accessed for this project. We combined that with the information that is already available and that Guelph has always traditionally used from the census data and from the Transportation Tomorrow survey, the comprehensive GTA-wide origin destination survey that happens every 5 years. And so with those three independent pieces of data, push them together, and that's what gave us our really the data foundation for estimating the mode share levels into the future.
Okay, but the data didn't specifically tell you how they traveled, how long they stayed there, or what they were doing when they were there, but it wasn't designed to give you that data.
Correct. It's what we call anonymized, so that we don't obviously violate people's privacy rights project a few years ago, it did not have a great foundation for accessing mode share choice of current trips, how you were currently traveling. The TTS data does do that. And the census data gives you some information as well about trip purpose. So that's why the three data sources work best together. The Streetlight Data Platform now has a better data set for mode choice, and going forward, Jenny and her team may choose to access that information again. It was bought specifically for completion of this project, and it has an annual cost that Jenny and her team, that you folks will continue to assess whether or not that's a good way to spend your money to access that information to inform future decisions.
Okay, thank you. My final question, in the list of various reports and master plans that were examined and will continue to help form decision making, everything from Trails Master Plan and Transit, there were a bunch of different master plans. But the ones I didn't hear and I didn't see them in the report are the Cultural Heritage Action Plan and a really old one that you might have to dust off your shelf, and that is the Centennial Neighborhood, Old University and Centennial Neighborhood Secondary Plan that actually recommended some kind of pedestrian crossing between Water and College. Are those plans also included in this, even though they weren't mentioned in the report?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Caron, we didn't directly review those plans, but we consulted internally with our colleagues in planning services. So with their knowledge of what those plans contain, they helped inform, for example, in the OP recommendations, they helped flag which corridors were sensitive and would likely not be supported for any kind of road widenings, and areas that we should be cautious of. So indirectly, that information was relayed to our project team, but we didn't personally read those reports.
Okay. Great, thanks. All done.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to go to Councillor Downer, who I think has some questions, potentially maybe an amendment as well. Then I want to circle back to Councillor Salisbury. You also might have an amendment, so I want to kind of get to that. And then also Councillor O'Rourke has a second amendment, get to that. And then that's the end of my list for now. So Councillor Downer, let's go with you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm using my phone for my audio, as for some reason it's not working on my computer. I guess I have a question of staff, and then I sort of want to go to the issue. But first, I did want to say that I want to recognize the tremendous amount of work that went into the transportation master plan. And you know, we at council, just like the growth strategy last week, we get talking about some of the nitty-gritty things. But overall, I'm very, very happy with the overall plan, and kudos for the amount of work and engagement that has gone into this. So the question I have then is, where I sort of want to put my focus in, is on the area of Gordon between College and Stone, which feels like a deja vu for me because I was around 20 years ago or so when we did this whole thing around Gordon Street and the widening and the university, and of course that didn't happen then for a number of reasons that are for the same reasons that they're raising today, and some of the other reasons that happened. And it's not that I don't think that that might not be necessary later on. It's just that I think it might need some more discussion. So the one question I have around that though is, what is your timeline for looking at that potential widening? I understand it's not definite. What is the timeline that you would be starting to look at that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Downer. Typically, we wouldn't be looking at that widening until we start to see the service level indicators from transit, suggesting that the stage 3 of the QTN is likely to be recommended. That being said, this section of Gordon Street is also part of the cycling spine network and is also part of some conceptual design studies that we're looking at for the Investing in Canada Infrastructure program. So because we have this opportunity to look at of the preferred network of the TMP with the protected bike lanes, we don't want to preclude the possibility of a future lane widening for transit. So we are going to be looking at the existing property that we have and trying to figure out the best design solution at that time. But we're not looking at widening the traveled portion of the roadway through that project. That project is just looking at the full width of the public right-of-way property, and then where best to place the cycling infrastructure so that we don't preclude that possibility in future.
Okay. Okay, so I just want to, I am going to bring forward this amendment. The university has very strongly stated that they're opposed to the plan because they don't fully understand the implications of what this means for the campus. So they've talked about safety of pedestrians, they've talked about vibration in their buildings, but they've also talked about the landscape as an issue for them there, which was an issue before. Since then, we've had the Cultural Heritage Action Plan approved, which Councillor Caron has talked about. The University of Guelph is a candidate for the Cultural Heritage Action Plan, and as far as I know, I met with staff this morning, and the Heritage Guelph doesn't seem to be on the radar for this this work that has been done. And well, planning staff, I understand, have been talked to. It hasn't had comments from Heritage Guelph about this possibility. And the amount currently in the official plan, there could be a potential road widening of 1 to 3 meters on either side of Gordon. But this would allow for, in the OP, a potential of 4 to 10 meters, which is significant. I understand that wouldn't all be roadways. Some of that would be trees or sidewalks or bicycle lanes, but it's still sort of, we're giving the okay for that. And whether it's now or 4 or 5 years from now, whoever's, the public doesn't look at these plans and on a day-to-day basis. They're not aware of what's in them all the time. They're often surprised about what's going on. And I do think that this kind of work needs more consultation, more sort of discussions with the university before it's done, before it's initiated. And you talked about having all the work done and then coming to council, but I think that's why I think before we initiate any studies on this, that it should come to council for approval to move forward with those studies. And that some discussions with Heritage Guelph around that, and with more discussions with the university before it comes back as well. There is no potential widening on Gordon between Wellington and College. Largely probably because that's part of a heritage district, and I appreciate that. But so I'm just concerned about those same issues being there for the university as well, and just how that, I'm sure that would be taken into consideration, but I think we need more discussion. It's a significant landscape coming into this city, driving through the university. And I think it needs some extra attention when we get to that point of making those decisions. So if I could move the motion, I could ask clerks to put up the motions. They kind of go together. Well, I guess we can put them up separately, but that the University of Guelph and Heritage Guelph be consulted before studies are initiated for the potential quality transit network widening between Stone Road and College Ave. Again, the university is a major partner of the city of Guelph, and they're opposed to this plan because of this, and I would like to see more discussion with them. And I think Heritage Guelph needs to comment as well. And that also,
And
that's
I'm gonna
approval.
let me just jump in there, Councillor Downer. I did see your ward mate's hand go up to second, and so we'll make sure that that's captured so it's officially on. Now, I did see one, just only one motion come up on the screen as she was speaking, and then all of a sudden I saw two. Was the second one in regards to Heritage and Heritage Committee, and the first one in regards to the university?
Maybe the clerks could put them down quickly. Maybe could put them both up again. And I think Councillor Curran's seconding them both. And that again, so that the second part is about being required to come to council before we initiate the studies. Now, some of this stuff, some of this work will already be done and it might be there, but I think we need to red flag it. I mean, you know, this may be a long way off. It may not. We don't know. I just think it's important to red flag some of these issues and highlight them for down the road.
Councillor Curran, I'm sorry. Yes, Curran, would you be willing to also second this the second one? Yeah, thumbs up from you. Okay, so they're both on the floor then. And let me just ask a quick question. Does anybody want them separated? Okay. Okay, thank you. And then now speaking to the motion, the two amendments only. Let's go with Alt, please, and then Bell.
Thank you very much, Mayor Guthrie. I don't really have, and this is a question through the staff. I don't really have a problem with number one, but the question that I do have for staff is this not a regular element of protocol to consult the university on issues such as this? Number two, I have a little bit more problem with, but it strikes me that with both the university and with Heritage Guelph, this is part of a relatively normal procedure. So if staff could answer that, it would be appreciated.
Through the mayor to Council Alt. Yes, for stakeholders like Heritage Guelph, for the university, of course, we would engage them as we usually would when we're taking on these studies. I guess one of the things that we're just a little bit confused about is, you know, the engagement prior to starting the studies. But as we're starting, we've already talked to the university a few times as we were going through this engagement. And we certainly wouldn't miss an opportunity to engage them again when we get to that time when we're starting the studies on that particular property. So, and that particular piece of road. So I don't know if Terry or Jenny, if there's anything you'd like to add to that.
Through you, Mayor Guthrie, I think I'd just like to reiterate that, yes, we understand that partnership is critical with the university, and we do that work as part of the TMP. We did that work, and then we'll continue to do that work, whether it's an EA study or if there's the same sentiment would apply from a heritage perspective as well. We would certainly connect with Heritage Guelph through those future studies as well.
If I might, I have two more questions or concerns, Mayor Guthrie. The first one is, I had been told by one resident that Heritage Guelph was not consulted on the master plan. Is that correct? And if that is correct, why would they not be consulted on that, but be consulted on this?
Through you, Mayor Guthrie, maybe I'll start and see if anyone wants to jump in, but I think you're correct in that Heritage Guelph wasn't directly consulted for the plan. However, the plan does look at cultural heritage and other heritage related features in the city. And so where it would identify a potential future project, we would certainly know as city staff that as we're building our stakeholder and engagement plans for those future projects, that is the timeline in which we would reach out to that group.
Thank you. So with regards to part two, I have some similar concerns with part two that I had with Councillor O'Rourke's motion. It strikes me that DCAO Homes answered it somewhat prior to me asking the question, but it strikes me as preemptive if we in fact do not do a study in order to determine whether we need to take action on something. Hence, I think I have to vote against number two, but support number one, because I do want to make certain that the university, it's clearly stated for the university and for Heritage Guelph that a consultation will occur, and this might perhaps go some way to assuage certain concerns about the transportation master plan. So I appreciate them being separated, and I cannot support number 2, but number 1, absolutely.
Thank you. And then Councillor Bell, please.
Thank you. So my comments are around the second clause, and remembering back over 20 years ago when just Councillor Downer was on council at that time, the discussion was about the widening of Gordon Street at the university, but an important aspect of that discussion at that time was the expansion of the intersection of College and Gordon. And in my view, the reduction of size of the intersection at College and Gordon was a significant step to maintaining a pedestrian and cycling environment around the university. But the transportation master plan allows or enables the widening of Gordon and the widening of College in between Edinburgh and Gordon. So what that does is it magnifies the effect on pedestrian and cycling traffic at the intersection. And you can't build enhanced or protected pedestrian and cycling infrastructure through an intersection. So I think that it would be prudent to expand the scope over to College as well, and thereby adding further protection to the intersection of College and Gordon. So I am moving an amendment to the amendment to add the addition of the road widening check by City Council in between College, or excuse me, on College in between Edinburgh and Gordon. And that has been sent to the clerk. I don't know if I have a seconder.
Sure, I saw Karan's hand there and Downer, but Karan beat by 0.5 of a second. So just so everyone knows, I just want to confirm with everybody, Councillor Downer's amendments are technically like an additional like 4th and 5th standalone kind of motion. There's no actual amendment of something on there or within the policy. So they're at the standalone add-ons. So just to have that confirmation, so everyone's clear. Councillor Bell is now amending one of those add-ons of Councillor Downer's to include College between Edinburgh and Gordon. And if we could have could we have the original or Councillor Bell's? So the original, as you can see in number 2 there, is that council approval required on the studies for widening of Gordon Street and between Stone and College. And so that was the one that was specific to Councillor Downer's. And then Councillor Bell is now amending that to include College between Gordon and Edinburgh. Okay, so if you could take that off the screen, I'd like to call the vote on the amendment. Before I do that, I see Councillor Cron's hand. Did you want to say something on the amendment of the amendment? Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that the reason I'm going to vote for this is that I believe further study is needed on college as a result of the Ministry of Transportation plans for the Hanlon. College is to be closed at the Hanlon. I just want staff to confirm that College Avenue at the Hanlon is to be closed under the ministry's plans for Highway 6. That's my
Yes,
recollection. I just want confirmation that that's the
I saw a
case.
thumbs up from Jennifer Juice there, our staff member, but why don't you verbally give us the yes or no there?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the MTO has long-term, not tied to any time frame plans to provide an over-underpass of the Hanlon on College. The widening, I'll just remind everyone again, the widening that we are identifying here is for the potential future quality transit network.
Thank you. And thank you for the question, Councillor Karan. And then another question on the amendment to the amendment or comment, Councillor O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff. Is College between Edinburgh and Gordon on the Quality Transit Network? I thought the Quality Transit Network was like Gordon was like that frequent route. So I just want confirmation because I don't have the map open in front of me.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor O'Rourke. Yes, it can be a little hard to see unless you zoom in because some of the priority networks overlap. But a College between the Hanlon and Gordon Street is part of the Quality Transit Network. It's the dotted line, so it's proposed for potential future lane conversion, but it does not go east of Gordon.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, didn't we approve the grid and the transit plan just before the budget? We said it's a grid, this is the grid. We're just saying we want consultation before that piece of the grid proceeds? Or are we reconsidering part of the grid?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is part of the grid. I'm just getting confirmation live from our colleagues in transit, and they said, yes, it is part of the grid.
Okay, then I'm not sure I can support the amendment to the amendment.
Okay, no problem. And then I have a quick question too before the vote. Did we not just receive last year an announcement that we got federal funding for separated bicycle infrastructure on College, but that's between Edinburgh and the Hanlon, or is it all the way up to Gordon?
Through you, to you, Mr. Mayor, the funding that we got from the federal government is from the Hanlon to, I think it's Dundas Lane that we're looking at the conceptual design studies now, as well as Aramasa. It's part of the university campus east of Gordon Street, just before you get to the athletic center.
So all the way up. So let me just make sure. Again, we can still take the vote on this, but so what you're saying is the money that we received from the federal government for separated bicycle infrastructure is for that stretch from the Hanlon all the way up to Gordon, at least. In fact, a little bit past, right? I just want confirmation.
Subject to what our conceptual design study shows us, if it's feasible and we can do it.
We get the money. Okay. All right. Now we know. Knowing's half the battle. G.I. Joe. Okay. Councillor Downer.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Ms. Juice had told us, that we're talking about, for these motions, we're talking about the quality transit network widening, not the bicycle ones.
Not the bicycle. Yep. But I was just asking though, just for clarity about what's happening amongst the whole stretch though. Yeah. Okay, let's just call the vote on the amendment of the amendment, okay? So all in favor, raise your hand on that one. Okay, so I'll go Karan and Hoffland and Gordon and Alt and Bell and Downer and Salisbury. I got 7 on that one. So against, please show your hands. Guthrie, Billings, O'Rourke, and Goller and McKinnon. You think I'd be faster after this many years. Okay, now let's go back to the original two, and I've asked for them. Those were asked to be separated. So I'm just going to call the vote on number 1 right now. All in favor of number 1, please raise your hand. Okay, and I think against is only McKinnon? Yes. Am I right, McKinnon? Yep. Okay, so that passes. And then I'm calling the vote on just number 2 as amended. Okay, all in favor of that one, raise your hand for me. Okay, I'm gonna go Billings and O'Rourke and Salisbury and Downer and Bell and Hoffland and Caron. I got 7 on that one. So against, just so that the names are there, it'd be me and Alt and Gordon and McKinnon and Goller. So that passes. So thanks, Councillor Downer. Okay, I'm going to go now to Salisbury. I think he has something to give us as an option. And then right after that, I have O'Rourke. So Salisbury, over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, just a follow-up question. With regards to Elmira Road, we used to see capital projects in the budget, and we don't see that anymore. So I'm curious if the extension of Elmira Road to 24 is still in the capital budget, or if it has been removed.
Through the mayor to Councillor Salisbury, maybe just while I've got you at the same time, just to get back to you on your first question from earlier this evening, we were able to confirm the right-of-way for Whitelaw Road is in fact 20 meters.
Correct.
So we have that information for you here. I'm looking at the city's capital budget as we speak, and it does look like there is a project in the budget. Just loading it at this moment that earmarks some design related budget out as far as potentially 2031, just noting that the budget would have been prepared before the transportation master plan.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Do one last question with regards to some of the details before I put my amendment on the floor, if there's a seconder. Secondary or collector streets, are they normally, is there collector streets that have no truck traffic, or is it sort of inherent that collector streets are truck traffic permissive?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Salisbury, typically we try to keep truck routes on arterial roads only.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to propose an amendment. If I have a seconder, I'll speak to it. And I've spoken to the clerks, although it may not be the exact wording. Simply put, to classify Whitelaw Road as a local street is what the motion is. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to that.
Okay, go with Billings there as a seconder, just to keep it in the family with Ward 4 there.
That's also the correct wording. I just wasn't sure if it was more appropriate to remove Collector Road or to classify as local. I think it's potato, but.
Well, let's just procedurally, let's just be careful. What would you like? Because you verbally said something that was different on the screen. If you're good with what's on the
correct.
screen.
I wonder if our staff could comment if there's any implication for the wording difference, because I don't think there is.
Sure. So I'll just, as the chair, I'll make a decision right now that sort of we're in limbo on what's on the floor. Just we'll pause for a moment and let's use this question as a question before we get to the motion. Then,
would it be more appropriate,
with
Mr.
what
Mayor,
was
to classify it as a local road, or to remove the designation as a collector road? I mean, which is the more appropriate way to do it?
Again, he's not asking you whether or not you're in favor of it or not. He just wants to know what the proper wording would be.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe the original wording to classify Whitelaw Road as a local road would be appropriate wording.
I think he had the word remove, I think.
Well, there was I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I had put forward remove it or declassify it versus, yeah.
So let's just everyone pause and let me ask the questions so we can move forward. Is this what you want, Councillor Salisbury, based on the answer?
It is correct unless there's an unintended consequence, and I'm looking to not have Whitelaw Road designated a collector road.
Okay. And I think the staff are saying, regardless of their opinion on it, that the wording on that is understood. So Councillor Billings, are you okay with seconding that still? Yes. Floor is yours, Councillor Salisbury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's some peripheral details and then the rationale behind this motion. The peripheral details are that according to our own official plan, a collector road is designated because it's moderate speed, 2 to 4 lanes, and a 23 to 26 meter right of way. Whitelaw Road we're looking to reduce the speed. It is only 2 lanes with on-street parking and no bike lanes, and that's because it is only 20 meters below. So it doesn't meet the threshold for our own criteria based on the official plan for a collector road. However, my intent for this is because in setting it up as a collector road, we're going to institutionalize unintended consequences. We've heard again and again Niska people talking about the traffic on Niska Road. That traffic on Niska Road is looking to connect through, or does frequently connect through to Whitelaw. I know because I've taken it myself a few times. It's a convenient cut through. And in doing so, when you get to Whitelaw Road and Elmira Road, there is no signage to tell you anything different than proceeding forward. Although 100 meters to the right is an arterial road with a 36 meter bike lane, sidewalk, huge boulevard, the correct road to be on. So my concern is that we're looking at initiating all of these traffic calming efforts. We're looking at doing all of this work to effectively reduce the impact of traffic on that, and yet our own transportation master plan is calling it a collector road. And so I think it's important because it will then puts the heat back on moving forward with the correct or the logical path of extending our arterial road, which is already in the capital budget, but may not be necessary if we're driving all the truck traffic down Whitelaw. So it's sort of one of those things that by, if we can continue to call it a collector road and treat it as such, we are going to have the same kind of problems that we have on Downey Road, the same kind of problems we have on Niska, simply because our own plan says it's a collector road and not what it really is, which is a local road. So I hope that my councillors will support this as they did when we discussed improving the timeline on that Elmira Road project about, I don't know, 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago. We had quite a debate on moving that up from way down the road to sooner because of this problem.
Thank you. I know I've got a couple questions just on this one, but I saw Alt and Galler.
Thank you, Mayor Guthrie.
Yeah.
I had hoped to be rather quiet tonight, but there's been many questions that have come up that I have to ask, and I believe I have to ask this one of staff. I find Councillor Salisbury's motion to be pretty appealing, as I'm reasonably familiar with that area, and am very aware of the comments that he made about Elmira Road. And I just want staff to confirm that. Elmira Road being, I think, about 200 meters adjacent to Whitelaw Road, if I recollect, is more than 4 lanes wide, if my memory serves me properly. And Whitelaw Road is currently 2 lanes wide. Strikes me that with the density increasing in that area, we are potentially creating a bit of a problem, not just for transportation master plan, but this area, I recollect about a year ago, was identified as a walkable neighborhood. People could walk to Zares from the apartments that are being built in there. So I'm getting a bit confused on what our intent is. And I was hoping that staff could comment on the Elmira Whitelaw issue that Councillor Salisbury has raised.
Through the mayor to Councillor Alt, maybe I'll start. There's a handful of things that maybe we should try to clarify here and to help this conversation along. So first off, with respect to the motion, I'm not sure if it came across clearly, but I think if there were to be a classification change, we would need to have the road reclassified. So I think the motion wording around removal there could be a nuance there, an unintended consequence potentially, as Councillor Salisbury noted. I think it would need to be reclassified from to, and so that would be maybe perhaps better wording. A few other nuances. Our official plan does recognize that there are existing collector roads that are less than that 23 to 26 meter right of way. So that is noteworthy. At the end of the day, the collector road is also around function and how the road is used, right? And so the classification or reclassification may have very little impact on volume, for example, right? And so if the road functions the way that it functions, then drivers will use the road as they see appropriate. And so there's some nuances there to that. The other thing I would mention around the budget piece is, and I tried to be clear, but I just want to be more clear. The TMP is after the multi-year budget. The TMP does not have extension of Elmira Road into the county as a proposed project. So if the TMP were approved tonight with that nuance in there, then staff would update the multi-year budget to remove that. So that's an important clarification as well.
So let me continue with the questions as Councillor Salisbury was made aware as the mover of the nuance of the wording. I think we understand the intent of the motion, regardless of the correct wording at this point. We get the realm of why we're asking questions on it. So if staff could connect with Councillor Salisbury as the mover, just to make sure that the wording is right, so it can be sent to the clerks. I'll continue with the questions then. I had Gawler and then Bell. And then if no one else, I've got a couple myself.
Thank you, through your worship, to staff. It's my understanding that collector roads will get a certain level of improvements in terms of active transportation, bicycle, pedestrian. Does that mean that this would mean this change would not have any of those improvements given to Whitelaw? So they would not see any added infrastructure in terms of pedestrian and cycling access. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the way a typical local road functions, it doesn't require dedicated cycling infrastructure. We do recommend sidewalks on both sides, but typically it's characterized by low traffic volumes, lower traffic speeds, and shorter distances. So it's just not, from a safety perspective, required to have dedicated cycling infrastructure. The way Whitelaw connects between Wellington Road in the south and Paisley in the north, it connects two arterial roads. It's a longer stretch. It's very straight. It naturally is going to attract trips from the local road network to get to either one of those arterial roads. And there is a possibility for higher volumes and higher speeds that we are mitigating through the road design currently. And so we would still recommend having dedicated cycling facilities on that road.
Okay, so even if it was changed to a local road, it would still get improvements and speed reduction supports, or not? Because what I want to ask is, I would like to see those added to Whitelaw. If I vote in favor of this change, does that mean that Whitelaw gets left as it is, and people are going to be speeding up and down Whitelaw?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gawler, we already have road design work underway, and it does include cycling infrastructure. I would just be very cautious to downgrade the classification from collector to local, because it will still function. It will function by people's behavior as a collector road, regardless of what we call it. So changing the designation to a local road is really just changing the name without changing the beast itself.
Okay. Thank you for that. And just one follow-up question based on what you said. You have work underway. I believe we have a policy that council cannot make a change if we have contracted work to be done. So we couldn't close down a dog facility if we had already started building that dog facility. So in this case, can we change the designation of that road if there is active design work for that road to be as a collector?
Through the mayor to Councillor Goller, I think what I can answer to that is we certainly wouldn't recommend it.
Okay, but we can. So we're not prevented from it because we have a contract underway to do work on that road.
Through the mayor, so the city is working on the design. The construction is forecast for the future. So we're not at construction for the traffic calming measures or the improvements. I'll say towards Paisley. The budget for the more significant road reconstruction is in 2023.
Okay, thank you very much. And just a comment, Your Worship, I would just have a question of the mover, how they would see this playing out, because I imagine that they would have liked to see traffic safety measures put into that road, and it seems to me that this motion would delay those, the implementation of that work.
Okay, I will allow that for sure. I'd like to sort of let's get to the conclusion here. This is just kind of a straightforward motion of what's in front of us here. So to the mover to answer, Councillor Goller.
Thank you, Councillor Goller. You're absolutely correct. A couple things by context. Perhaps the reason that we're looking at traffic calming measures is because it's already being used as a cut through. Staff have indicated that those measures are not at risk with this reclassification. Of course, I'd like to see that go through. Oh, one last thing. The road at 20 meters with parking on one side, there's really no way to put in cycling, laneways without major changes on a road that it's below the minimum threshold for the collector classification in our official plan.
Okay, thank you. And I'll go to Bell and now O'Rourke and then myself. Sorry, Councillor Bell, just start over there for us. You're muted.
Sorry, I will be supporting the amendment. And the reasons are that I don't want Whitelaw Road to evolve into anything more than it currently is south of where the intensification is happening. If we, and I understand that we have decided to take a preemptive action and to institute some traffic calming measures, but the traffic calming measures in our policies that are able to be applied to collector roads are not the same as those that can be applied to local roads. So the portion of Whitelaw's south of the intensification should not be subjugated to those less severe traffic calming measures. And it's imperative that we move traffic intentionally from Whitelaw over to Elmira, and classifying it as a collector, I don't think is the way to do that. So, so I will be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And O'Rourke, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a really quick operations question. So I thought once a road was classified as a collector, it was actually in the priority order for snow removal. And so I'm just wondering if we change the designation of the street, but it's functioning as a street, and we know 361 Whitelaw is coming with a huge, population, doesn't that downgrade operations service to that road? And so that's my only concern with that. So I guess the question for Ms. Clack or for engineers, but I mean, we just spent a lot of time telling people how the roads get plowed and what the priority order is.
Sorry,
Terry, I was going to jump in.
Yeah.
But,
okay, go ahead. No, by all means.
So through the mayor to Councillor O'Rourke, our winter maintenance is classified by primary and secondary routes, and so we wouldn't necessarily change our winter maintenance on the road dependent on this motion. We do our winter maintenance based on the usage of the road, transit routes, et cetera, and how they get classified. And so it wouldn't, the outcome of this vote does not necessarily result in a change in winter control, if that helps.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Jane, you go ahead. I'm not going to ask my question anymore because Councilor O'Rourke asked my question because we're in the same building. We connected.
So,
Jane.
so through that to you, Mr. Mayor, and just to council. So just getting a little bit concerned from a staff point of view. This was not part of the TMP. We did not have a chance to look at this motion ahead of time. So as you can hear, there's already concerns about we haven't talked about funding yet. There's funding issues, but there's already concerns about prioritization, where it sits in relation to some of the other projects. And so anyway, just getting a little bit concerned that we are making some of these decisions on the fly here, and we haven't had a chance to fully look at some of these motions beforehand. So there's some questions in here that, like I said, funding, operations, things that we haven't had a chance to fully flush out. So I just would hope that I wish we could have had a chance to look at these motions ahead of time, Mr. Mayor, because then we would have had a chance to provide some information so council can make an informed decision.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'm circling now. I'll go to Councillor Alt, but then I'd like to call the vote on this, please.
Thank you, Mayor Guthrie. Initially, I was swayed by the councilor's motion. However, staff have made a very compelling argument for not doing this, and I can well understand that in some senses what we're dealing with are the nuances of nomenclature, and consequently, I just have to say, despite my initial support, Councillor Salisbury, I'm going to have to vote against it.
Okay, I'm going to just, as I normally do, out of respect, go back to the mover, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps I'll sway Councillor Alt one more time. Just to answer two issues that were raised by staff. Although the exact wording of the motion clearly was fine-tuned this evening, I have been in touch with staff on the issue and received some preliminary information, although perhaps not with sufficient time to properly flesh out all the details. Secondly, staff made reference to it being changing in name only. And I do want to point out that a document like a master plan becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is the kind of justification that future decisions are made on. And so if it is classified as a collector road, when it fits very few, if any, of the categories that call it so and doesn't behave as one, but now has the justification for perhaps a truck route or something else, something that is unexpected but is justified because it is classified as a collector road, and as such, maybe the street parking is removed or any number of things that could happen down the road with unintentional consequences. And so I think it's really important that while the issue is may seem like it's come up fairly quickly, it doesn't fit the criteria that we actually have for calling it as such, and it collects nowhere to nowhere except for the fact that truck traffic coming in off of Highway 24 without any other alternative continues straight on through on the way to the node that doesn't even have permissive truck routes at this point with this plan. And this is a 30-year plan. That's my word. Thank you.
Thank you. So my only question before I call the vote then is, as Councillor Salisbury, as the mover just said, this is a 30-year plan, but this is not a plan that locks us into anything. If there was anything about changes to the road, in fact, I believe staff said that there's already work underway about traffic calming, parking being removed, bike lanes, things like that, that would automatically trigger all of the engagement with that community before any of that infrastructure would happen anyways. So can I just get confirmation of that?
Through you, Mayor Guthrie, that's correct.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the vote, please. So all in favor of the amendment, which is to number 1, please.
Pardon me.
Pardon me,
Oh,
Mr. Mayor.
yep.
My apologies for interrupting. There was an original motion displayed and then a reference to voting on amended language, and I want to be very clear. If we vote right now, we're voting on what was originally displayed on the
Okay.
PowerPoint to City Council.
Okay. No, let's just have it in the books correct for the mover. I wanna acknowledge that. So let's let me ask first of all, I need you verbally to ask if you could have it removed, Councillor Salisbury. So could you do that for me?
If I could have the motion removed?
Okay. To council, is anyone object to that? No. Councillor Salisbury has sent the updated wording to the clerk. It's going to go up on the screen. And Councillor Billings, I'm hoping you'll still second it, so at least it's live.
I'll just clarify, Mr. Mayor, I have not received this wording from Councillor Salisbury, but this has been worked on in communication with
staff?
engineering staff. That's correct.
Okay, so Councillor Salisbury, you will have to follow through after this to make sure you forward this to the clerks, because I'm moving us along, but technically I'm supposed to have it come from you now.
This was sent to me and I confirmed that it was acceptable. I don't know if that's
Just
not.
just send an email to the clerk that just
Okay.
says agree, and that's good enough for us. Councillor Billings, you're still okay with the seconder on that? Okay, back to me calling the vote then. All in favor of this amendment, please raise your hand. Okay, Bell and Salisbury and Billings and against, just to raise the hands and we'll call it out. So Guthrie and Gordon and Hoffman and Karan and McKinnon and O'Rourke and Goller and Alt and Downer. Okay, so that fails. Thank you though. Good discussion on that one. And on my last on my list is Councillor O'Rourke. Back to you. You had I think a financial amendment that you wanted to consider bringing forward.
Yes, thank you, Mr.
And
Mayor.
then Salisbury after.
This one's really quick. When we brought in the red light cameras, when we brought in automatic speed enforcement, we know that finance is looking at a reserve policy. And all the language we see around that reserve policy is that those funds be used for road safety initiatives. And so I have a motion that's been through finance and doesn't seem to have any concerns. And it's really just to ensure that they're also considering cycling, separated cycling, which is also safety related, but that some of that funding could be earmarked and not excluded from the funding, potential funding that would be potentially generated by the red light cameras or the automatic speed enforcement. So just that when they're developing that policy, that they apply a broader lens in terms of what road safety means, and that it become a potential source of funding for some of the projects under the TMP.
So Councillor O'Rourke, let's before you keep going, let's see if there's a seconder. Okay, let's get it up on the screen. It looks based on your preamble there that Councillor Billings has her hand up as a seconder. So let's just pull it up so everyone sees it. And let me just ask, is this an actual amendment or is it an added motion? How would staff deal with this?
It's a new motion.
I think it's a new motion as well. That's the way I'm viewing it. Staff, you're okay with that then? So it'd be a number
Actually, Mr. Mayor,
6, basically,
because the revised amendment that I sent struck out sidewalks that are part of infrastructure. And so if we can use the revised.
Oh, you sent a revised one, not the one that was just up on the screen?
That's correct.
Okay, the clerk's just going to take a second to find that. But as the clerk is doing that, we'll treat this as a number 6, okay, everyone, as a separate standalone, just like Councillor Downers was number 4 and 5. This will be number 6. And I interrupted you a little bit, Councillor O'Rourke, just to try to see if there was a seconder, which there was by Councillor Billings. Did you want to say anything more on it, or do you want me to go to any questions from Council?
You're welcome to go to questions.
Okay. Is there questions on this one? Okay, Councillor Goller, go ahead.
Thank you. Through your worship to staff, just one question. Would this have the potential to delay or slow down any of the planned traffic safety measures on the works?
Through you, Mayor Guthrie, to Councillor Goller, I may need some advice from our treasurer, Ms. Baker, but I believe the answer to that question would be No, because that funding source has not arrived to the city, and those policies don't exist at this point. So the funding model that council would have had through the multi-year budget, I don't believe would have included
Terry, I
that
do
line.
see that
Thank you.
Tara's popped on here. Why don't we just, Tara, can you hear and could you respond to that question and if you heard it?
Good evening. Yes, I did hear
Perfect.
it.
Okay, thank you.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it would not affect the timing. We had already been planning to do that work and bring that forward in Q2 this year to council for that reserve fund.
Okay, thank you. That's it from me, Your Worship.
Thank you. Anything further on this one?
Mr. Mayor, I do have what I believe is the correct motion to pull up. I would just ask the mover to confirm for me, if you don't mind.
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So I just have two questions then. Thank you to the mover. So to staff, any red flags with this at all? Because the work hasn't begun on it.
To you, Mayor Guthrie. Hopefully, I've been informed I've been fairly echoey tonight, so hopefully you hear me better now. Okay, I'm not sure what to think of that headset tonight.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, so to you, Mayor Guthrie. So no concerns. That's the work that we need to do. So that's okay.
Okay, great. That's great. All right. Well, let's call the vote on that then. All in favor of this amendment, please raise your hand. Looks unanimous to me. Thank you, Councillor Rourke. It passes. Councillor Salisbury, I saw your hand go back up. I'm going right back to you then.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to seek clarification from staff that I heard that the approval of this transportation master plan will in fact remove the extension of Elmira Road to 24 from the capital project list. Is that, and from any future consideration as part of the transportation master plan?
Terry, back to you. I think you're the one that originally clarified that for us.
That's right. So through you, Mayor Guthrie, to Councillor Salisbury, that's correct. The TMP does not plan for that extension. I can also add that the county's recent road action plan as well does not consider that based on their studies as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, all the amendments are done, everybody. We've waded through it and totally awesome discussion, and we appreciate all the citizen input that got us here. It's now time to vote on it. May I call the vote then as as amended? Okay, I'll call the vote then. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, we're on the main motion?
Yep.
And the three clauses?
Just the three. That's right.
Can we separate them?
Well, okay. All right, no problem. So we had number 4 and 5 and 6 technically put down as amendments. So that's why I said we're voting on the main motions and then as amended, like the entire grouping of it. To the clerk, you're okay with that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So the main motion as amended means that the first resolution is amended and that an additional 4, 5, and 6 resolution numbers are added to the end.
That's right.
And that can be done in a single vote unless there's a request to separate out those 6 resolutions as presented.
Okay. So Councillor O'Rourke, we caught it just on the 11th hour there, which I'm going to acknowledge. What do you want to have separated?
I'm still struggling with recommendation 1, Mr. Mayor, and sort of abdicating some of our ability to set timelines. So I'd like to separate 1 and then 2 and 3 can be voted on together.
Okay, so I'm going to separate 1 and then it will be 2, 3, 4, and 5 and 6 as one grouping. Okay, so all in favor of number 1, please raise your hand for me, please. All right, so it'd be Downer, Bell, Alt, McKinnon, Guthrie, Gawler, Hoffland, Gordon, and Caron. And then against on number 1, just so we have the hands up, Billings, O'Rourke, Salisbury. And then the second vote I'm going to ask for is the grouping of the rest, okay? So all in favor of those, please raise your hand for me, okay? So I think I see everyone except for Salisbury. I just want to make sure. So let me just call the vote now against. Yep, just Salisbury, so that passes as well. Okay, thanks everyone. We waded through that fine. Thank you. I can't go to Councillor Gibson for the bylaws. Who would like to? Councillor Bell, would you mind being from Ward 1 moving those or just someone else? Okay, thank you.
So I'll move that bylaw 2022-2669 is hereby passed.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Hoffland. I missed you with my seconder all the time. Good to have you back. That's perfect. Anything on the bylaws, anybody?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just a very quick comment to note a correction to the agenda. So the agenda as published states that this bylaw is to confirm the proceedings of a meeting of council held September 22nd, 2021. It's to confirm the meetings of today's council meeting, January 24th, 2022.
So I'm sure Councillor Bell and Councillor Hoffland are okay with that little amendment there. Okay, you're okay with that as being captured correctly?
Yep, that's
don't
great.
have a flux capacitor and a DeLorean to be able to fix that one. So, all right. So all in favor of the bylaws, raise your hand for me. As amended there. Okay, that's unanimous, confirmed by the clerk. All right, and now I'm looking for adjournment, please, and billings. And I'm gonna go a little bit different today. I'm gonna go with Downer for the seconder for adjournment. All in favor of adjournment, please. That looks unanimous as well. Have a safe night, everyone. Thanks to staff and the public and my colleagues. Stay safe. Bye-bye.